He's just playing his favorite game when he suddenly gets sucked inside it. He wakes up in the body of some extra NPC, and when he looks in the mirror, he can't help but cry in despair. You see, he ended up in the body of Evan Dashatan, a pitiful side character doomed to die no matter what. He's tried to save Evan for years now, and nothing ever worked. Evan died every single time in all possible ways. Once he was crushed by a monster. Another time he died from poison. Once he simply slipped and died. On another day, a maid stabbed him after he broke up with her. Then 10 more girls tried to kill him after he hurt their feelings. And finally, he even died saving the game's protagonist during the battle with the final boss. That time, he survived the longest, so at least there's some hope that maybe he can make it this time. But then comes the big question. Where does he even begin? That is when he sets his first goal to figure out how to be the kind of extra who actually lives. Knights train tirelessly to perfect their sword skills, and magicians focus on casting powerful spells. Evan figures the answer is simple. Level up. When the level goes up, magicians get more mana to cast stronger spells, while warriors become tougher, faster, and harder to beat. When Mabel hears that, she wonders if our boy is thinking of stepping into a dungeon already. She yells at him as he tries to brush it off. She scolds him seriously, saying he should not even joke about such things, since dungeons are packed with terrifying monsters. Being someone from a noble family, he will be expected to enter one eventually once he becomes an adult. Until then, she wants him to focus on getting proper training and becoming stronger. She makes it clear that she is not going to let him go anytime soon. He tries to calm her down by agreeing with her as she finally takes her leave. He had purposely said it loud enough for her to hear, just to see how she would react. The thing is, our protagonist has already lived as himself in this world for 9 years now, and he knows the people of this world are under a serious misunderstanding. They believe the only way to level up is by going into dungeons. Although there is some truth to that clearing, dungeon floors does grant blessings that help people grow stronger. Eventually, the kingdom had to take control by assigning nobles to manage dungeons, which led to the creation of a dungeon city. That city is now under the control of none other than his father, Marquis Selene D. Sheaton. Clearing dungeons can indeed raise the level, but Evan knows that there are other ways to become stronger if the methods he learned while playing are used. Mabel hears him and curiously wonders what he means. He smiles gently and reassures her not to worry. He knows he is seen as a minor character in Demon War, yet the truth is that he is one of the most charming ones. He adds that sadly he will not be smiling much anymore, and it is because he knows what is coming. That very smile could cause major problems in the future. Even a casual grin can bring danger, and he does not want to trigger any death flags. Pushing those thoughts aside, he focuses on what matters. Evan has just confirmed how people here see demons, and now he only needs to find a way to survive. The first step of many immortality projects is leveling up. So he turns to Mabel and asks when his birthday is. She replies that it is coming up next week. He then instructs her to let his father know he wants to meet him before then because he cannot wait any longer. To begin his plan, he needs something specific from the Marquis, the Mirror Soul's necklace. It was the first artifact discovered inside the Sharan dungeon and was passed down to their family. In the game, the only way to get the necklace was to form a pact with Evan, and the main problem is that there was a specific event that activates it. He remembers the event very well. When our boy tried to activate the Mirror Soul's necklace, he poured in mana and cast a spell. And that's when things went sideways. Out of nowhere, thousands of slimes appeared and swarmed the area. They were all weak level 1 slimes, but he did not know how to stop them from appearing. He fought them off as best he could, but eventually the scene of Evan being swallowed by slimes became one of the most infamous moments in the game's history. At that moment, he noticed something important. While playing as the main character, he killed one of those slimes to protect Evan, and the game displayed a message that he had gained 1 experience point. In that moment, he realizes that the slime summoned by the necklace actually gave experience points. It's different from the levels gained by clearing dungeon floors. The experience would raise their very existence. The world of games works in a way where every single action gives some sort of outcome. In that world, people call it a gaming experience. Whether someone fights monsters or spends time training, they gain experience by repeating the same actions again and again. The people living in that world think of this as just getting better at the task, like building a skill. In reality, they've got it all wrong. What's actually happening is they're leveling up their very existence, not just improving their skills. Back when Evan Darrington was a player, he noticed this little detail. Along with the levels he gained in dungeons, he could also see his existence levels growing. Our boy knew this was definitely possible. Much like dungeon levels, Existence levels don't just shoot up overnight. Their growth is slow and steady, and it often depends heavily on a person's natural abilities or talent. But existence levels have one unique feature: they have no upper limit. That's what makes them so different from dungeon levels. Just then, Mabel comes over, interrupting his thoughts. She informs him that his father is waiting and the head maid will be escorting him. Thanks to his constant efforts in the game, our protagonist has managed to gain valuable experience over time. Because of the existence levels he earned from his laborer title, even someone weak and feeble was able to grow stronger. Of course, if he were to actually enter a dungeon, things would still go badly. He'd probably get sliced in half and wouldn't make it out alive. Normally, a laborer would hunt to earn experience, but he's too young for that kind of danger right now. Still, he wonders if there are any monsters weak enough for a child to defeat. He gets the idea to summon extremely weak slimes and then kill them for experience. Mirasol's necklace uses 1 MP to summon a level 1 slime. In the game, a level 1 character usually starts with 100 HP and 100 MP. So by that logic, Evan should be able to summon around 100 slimes. Slimes offer a tiny, almost negligible amount of experience, but he figures he can make it work if he starts early. They soon arrive at the Marquis's office. After getting permission to enter, he steps inside. The second son knows his role as the Marquis's child and decides to play it perfectly to get his hands on Mirasol's necklace. He tells his father he'd like his birthday gift a little earlier than usual. The Marquis questions why he's in such a rush. Evan insists that he saw a necklace earlier and that he really wants it. The Marquis is surprised. He didn't expect his son to ask for jewelry instead of a sword or a pet. When he hears the request is for Mirasol's necklace, he's clearly shocked. The Marquis explains that the necklace is a family heirloom, not something he can just hand over lightly. Our protagonist unleashes his ultimate move, pleading with puppy dog eyes. It works, and convinces the Marquis. On one hand, he has his son's heartfelt request. On the other, even if the necklace doesn't seem to hold any real power, it's still a treasured family heirloom. Then he recalls that artifacts are said to choose their own owners, and guesses that Mirasol's necklace must have chosen Evan. So he finally agrees and decides to give him the necklace as a birthday present. In that moment, Evan leaps forward and gives his father a huge hug. The Marquis warns him that there's a limit to how many artifacts a person can equip. He explains that there are magical artifacts out there like rings, swords, and necklaces. But no matter where the artifact is worn, a person can only equip 5 at a time. That's the maximum amount of power a person's body can handle. He wants his son to know that once he grows older and finds other powerful artifacts, he won't be able to keep them all. He adds that Evan must return Mirasol's necklace to its rightful place in storage as it's still a part of their family's legacy. Our protagonist, however, only plans on returning it after he's leveled up enough. He knows he won't be able to farm experience from slimes forever. Our boy promises to return it later, but right now he's more concerned about how he's supposed to track his level. He realizes he needs something like a status window to keep track of his existence level and experience. Still, for now, he's just glad he got his hands on Mirasol's necklace. When he gets back to his room, he examines the necklace closely. A memory hits him of the time he died after being devoured by slimes. He reminds himself that the Evan from the game made a critical mistake by activating the artifact before getting it under control. That's what caused it to go haywire. But he isn't the same Evan. He knows the proper way to resist an artifact's control, how to summon slimes, and exactly what to watch out for. He also remembers the chant, the very one that ended his life in the game. This time, though, he knows things will be different. Our boy feels a connection forming between himself and Mirasol's necklace. As he channels mana into his hand, a slime materializes in his palm. Despite its cute appearance, the slime immediately attacks. Our boy notices that the level 1 slimes only inflict very weak poison damage on him. He figures they'd only become dangerous if they swarmed him in overwhelming numbers. He reminds himself that he's no longer the same person he was before. He grips the slime in his hand and squeezes it hard. He remembers from the game that continuous damage causes a character to fall into a special state known as critical condition. When a character is in that state, there's a unique attack that can be used. It's a move that finishes things in a single blow. Players in the game used to call it the one-hit finisher. The moment the slime materializes, he uses this finishing move, squashing it instantly. After a few practice runs, he figures out it takes him about 10 seconds to defeat a slime. He knows that if he were already level 20, he could pop a slime with just a single tap. Still, he knows he can't stop now. This slime training will eventually pay off. Over time, that experience will stack up and help him grow stronger, so he decides to make it part of his daily grind. The training actually turns out to be quite draining on both his stamina and mana. If he keeps repeating this routine nonstop, our protagonist's body, which is still just a level 1 9-year-old, will inevitably reach its limit. He knows the game mechanics, of course. When players push themselves too far, they'd get hit with a status ailment. For example, if stamina fell below 50%, the character would get the chills. If it dropped under 30%, they'd break out in a cold sweat. Based on what he knows, he figures he'll be fine, as long as he stays above that 30% danger zone. With that in mind, he plans to manage his stamina and mana carefully while he continues to train. After training for a while, he manages to defeat a slime much faster than before. This makes him wonder if his existence level has already increased. Yet he feels it shouldn't be that easy to raise his existence level. Unlike the game, there are no helpful status windows or clear indicators, so it's hard to be certain. He starts to wonder if the repetitive actions he's been performing have met the conditions for unlocking a skill. And then unexpectedly, he actually gets one. He assumes it might be related to how often he's been clenching his fist, maybe some kind of grip-strengthening skill, but even that feels too simple to be true. He also notices a strange squeezing feeling in his chest when his mana decreases, but his stamina doesn't show any obvious signs of depletion. Still, he's sure that continuously summoning slimes must be causing some kind of unseen strain. Our boy starts to wonder if Evan, being a side character in the game, naturally had better stamina than magical ability. Perhaps that's why he hasn't felt the full effects of exhaustion yet. A sudden realization hits him when he remembers Evan was a mage in the game, so none of this quite adds up. Meanwhile, outside the room, Mabel hears some noise and rushes in to check on him. Our boy assures her that everything is all right and tells her to come back in a couple of hours. After she leaves, our protagonist sends a silent curse to the game's developers. Although he has no intention of giving up or dying so easily, he decides to create a proper, structured daily schedule to train and improve his physical condition. He believes that combining slime training with scientifically backed exercise routines will produce better results. He also plans to write an extensive world-building guide, unlike the simple one he made before. This time he will include everything. We're talking the myths behind the game's creation, the histories of all the kingdoms, global politics, the locations of every hidden treasure, and details on every major character in this world. After all, our boy has played the game countless times, and the information is still fresh in his memory. He plans to make full use of that knowledge to avoid danger and stay ahead of the curve. However, he's well aware that this reality may not follow the game's plot to the letter. That's why he understands the importance of tracking the differences between the story he knew and what's happening now in real time. That's the only way he can even attempt to predict what's coming next. He is on high alert, feeling as if one of those deadly waves might already be inside the mansion, and he plans to tread very carefully from now on. Everything he's doing now is purely for the sake of survival. He has finally put together a training schedule with one goal in mind: strengthening his body. It's a blend of all the useful knowledge he's gathered from the game and the comprehensive world guide he's writing. With that plan locked in, Evan is ready to begin his training immediately. Mabel turns to the other servants and asks if they've noticed how their young master has been acting strange lately. She points out how he's been locking himself in his room, ordering everyone not to enter. One maid notices that Mabel's getting a bit too worked up and warns her to be careful. The servant boy reminds her that being friendly with the young master is fine, but they shouldn't forget he is still their superior. Getting too familiar could end badly, and there's no benefit in overstepping that boundary. Another maid agrees, adding that she too has sensed that something is off. The young master, who used to stir up trouble and pull pranks almost every day, has been unusually quiet. Things have been much calmer around the house as a result. The boy then mentions seeing him in the backyard doing something odd. He describes how the kid was holding some strange pose, and it almost looked like some kind of exercise. Hearing this, the maid recalls that she has also noticed him clenching and unclenching his fists a lot lately. The boy shrugs and says, maybe it is just one of those things children do that adults cannot really understand. Mabel is still worried and convinced that something has changed after Evan got sick. The maid tries to calm her down, while the boy warns that if she keeps acting like this, it will be hard for her to continue working there. Just then, another servant bursts into the dining room where they are all gathered. Out of breath, he reports that their young master just lifted a boulder from the garden. The boy immediately says that he is imagining things, but the newcomer insists. Though the boulder was not massive, it definitely was not the kind of thing a kid should be able to lift. Not only that, when he asked Evan about it, the boy calmly replied it was a stand-in for dumbbells. The poor servant does not even know how to pronounce dumbbells. Hearing that, Mabel tries to rush off to find him, but the maid grabs her and holds her back. The boy turns to the one who brought the news and presses again if he is sure he was not just seeing things. The servant answers that it really did happen. Mabel struggles to free herself, but the maid doesn't let her go. Meanwhile, Evan is with his mother reading Dee. Sheeton Mark was Sheeton's first wife. They are sitting together sipping tea. She lightly scolds her son, wondering what he has been so caught up in lately that he haven't even had time to sit and have tea with her like before. He explains that he has been busy researching artifacts and doing exercises to stay healthy. She instantly understands that by artifacts he means the mere soul's necklace he received from his father. But the part about doing exercises puzzles her. She had thought he wanted to become a powerful mage. Our boy replies that everyone has a path they are naturally drawn to. Forcing something that does not fit just brings misery not only to the one doing it, but also to the people watching and those pushing it as well. She gives him permission to do whatever he feels is right, since things will only get more hectic starting next year. That is when the young noble remembers nobility lessons begin at age 10. In just 1 year, he will be learning everything from noble history languages, math, geography, and swordsmanship, to magic and all the things a noble should know. She reminds him that as a member of the Shurdan Marquisa and a noble from the Dungeon City, he has a big responsibility. One day he will be helping his older brother manage the family's affairs, so he has to be ready for it. He figures what she really means is that once he becomes an adult, he will be expected to enter the dungeon and meet certain expectations. She is surprised that he already knows about that, but of course he does, since our protagonist died because of it in the game. He promises her that he will study hard once the year starts, though for now, she wants him to enjoy himself while he still can. She encourages him to play to explore the city like before, though the city is still in chaos after the dungeon's recent reverse flow. Evan agrees on the surface, but deep inside, he has already decided that he is going to keep up with the slime training every chance he gets. With 1 year left, he plans to fully master it and start the second immortality project. But for that, he needs to find a character who suits the project. Back in his room, he pulls out his notes going over the demigod characters he had encountered in the game's Vic Count storyline. He skips the Venom Spear and the Blood-Eyed Witch, even though she was both stunning and powerful. The problem is that he has no idea where they are now. Then his eyes land on Silent Knight, a character who is one of the strongest in the game, same as our hero. He recalls that Silent Knight was a deadly assassin who used twin daggers, could blend into shadows, and took down monsters silently. But Silent Knights and the other demigods, their fate was unfortunate. Evan believes he can change Silent Knight's destiny too. The assassin originally from Sheeton lost his parents in a large-scale dungeon reverse flow when he was just 9. He was sold to a foreign mercenary group and only awakened his powers after entering a dungeon. As the young noble thinks more about that large-scale dungeon event, he remembers his mother mentioning how the city is still recovering from the recent reverse flow. That means Silent Knight, one of the game's top-tier demigods, is probably here in Shiran right now. As he decides to find him, he heads to Mabel and announces that they are going shopping. Inside the carriage, she is still confused. Mabel wonders what he is planning to buy, since there is not much to see in the streets after all the dungeon chaos. He answers that he is going to buy a person, leaving Mabel speechless. He informs her that their destination is the slave market. Morning arrives, and in a damaged district, injured townspeople move slowly through the streets as a carriage rattles along the marketplace road. Inside, Evan explains the city's decline, linking it to the dungeon's reversal and the monsters that escaped, causing widespread damage. Mabel adds that with repairs still underway and monsters on the loose, not many merchants are likely to come back anytime soon. Our boy admits it's not the best time for a shopping trip, but says it can't be helped. If he misses this chance, the city will only get more crowded, making things tougher later on. His maid warns him that now is hardly the time to be out shopping, especially for a slave. But our protagonist calmly tells her not to worry. He explains that the market they're going to is the only one in Shiran that's officially sanctioned by the kingdom. She's skeptical, but he assures her it's supposed to be a safe and regulated place. He remembers that in this world, the state actually runs the slave markets, and after they were established, complaints about abuse practically disappeared. Still, there are loopholes that plenty of people exploit. Some victims even manage to fight back by providing proof of their mistreatment. And among these rebels is a legendary figure from Demon War II, a red-haired, flame-wielding girl known as the Blood Witch. He's met her before, and that encounter ended with his death. Just then, the carriage pulls up to a grand-looking building. Inside, Evan walks, flanked by a knight and his maid. The knight announces their arrival, and Evan turns to him, confirming the man will be his personal guard. The man introduced as Dine hesitates, pointing out This is hardly a place for a young noble. Shigaboidar Chebiye. But our protagonist firmly replies that he knows what he's getting into. He's not here for sightseeing or to show off his money. He's here to find people he genuinely needs. The knight suggests the Marquis could find people for him, but Evan insists on choosing them himself. He remembers that most of the people the Marquis picked for him died by his side in his past life. They head inside where they're greeted by a bald man. The man is surprised Evan came in person, but Evan explains he'd rather see the candidates for himself than trust someone else's judgment. He asks to see children around his age, knowing full well they're orphans from the recent disaster. The man explains that these kids steeled their resolve and sold themselves into servitude, which means most probably wouldn't be a good fit. But our boy counters that their situation just proves they're motivated and hardworking, so there's no need to test them. Instead, he wants someone who can grow with him and eventually stay by his side as a protector. The bald man sees no point in arguing and agrees. At Evan's request, he leads them to a room where several children are waiting. The man explains he's left out anyone younger than 12. Meanwhile, Evan carefully scans the group as more children are brought in. His eyes lock onto a boy with blue hair, black eyes, and tanned skin. He immediately recognizes him as the Silent Knight. His gaze then shifts to a red-haired girl, whom he remembers as a top 5 character from Demon War 3. She was infamous for her villainous reputation. Dean remarks that the kids look frail and suggests looking at others, but Evan refuses, insisting he needs them both. Demigods, beings chosen by the gods, were a unique feature of the Demon War game. They're a human subspecies that appeared out of nowhere, born with naturally weaker bodies and slower growth. This led most people to believe they were an inferior race, and yet some of them became unbelievably powerful, just like the two standing before him now. The Blood Witch and the Silent Knight, the two most famous representatives of their race in Demon War. Demigods overcame their physical weakness through dungeon leveling. When they leveled up inside a dungeon, they received twice the blessings a normal human would. The deeper the dungeon, the bigger the bonus, allowing them to become so powerful that regular humans could never hope to catch up. However, most demigods had a hard time even getting into a dungeon at a low level, and even if they managed to get in, most would die before reaching the 5th floor. The majority were essentially sacrificed, so a small few could become strong. Evan thinks to himself that everything will be fine this time. He vows he won't let these two die, not now that they're with him. The bald man apologetically explains their price is only half of the others, and that even taking that much might cause trouble with the Marquis. Our boy replies that he's not here to haggle over their price, and that he's taking them, period. Evan declares he'll take both children. He recalls instructing the trader earlier to send for any kids matching the descriptions he provided. The man had agreed, promising to keep it a secret. With this arrangement in place, Evan is confident he can find even more potential demigods. He turns to face the two kids and studies them, remembering the sheer murderous intent they had in the game. They fought without a shred of hesitation. There's no time for them to be mourning their parents. Our protagonist assures them he won't be a bother and simply asks for their names. The red-haired girl hesitates, confused by his gentle approach. When he asks again, she exchanges a look with the boy and introduces herself as Belua, adding that her mother used to call her Lua. He acknowledges her name with a smile, saying he hopes they'll get close enough for him to call her Lua too. The boy introduces himself as Shine. He recalls meeting Belua when he first entered the market, admitting to himself that this is the first time he's learned her name. Evan recognizes the name Shine, noting the irony, given the character's in-game concept as a silent knight. He formally introduces himself as Evan D. Sheaton and says he hopes they can all get along. Shine hesitates before asking a blunt question: why would Evan buy defective products like them? The Marquis's son coolly replies that if Shine is the same age as him, he should be smart enough to know the answer. Shine presses on, asking if Evan bought them simply to mock and toy with them. Evan goes quiet, his gaze shifting between the two. He then begins to speak about the world's inherent unfairness, aiming his words directly at Shine. The boy concedes that he understands this harsh reality. Evan reflects on his own good fortune being born the second son of a marquis and living a comfortable, happy life. He adds how astonishing it would be for people like them to ever receive such a blessing. Evan's words strike a nerve, and Shine bitterly admits the reality of his own life born into poverty and hardship. He claims his body is weak and useless, demanding to know what kind of blessing Evan is talking about. The protagonist's response is simple: an overwhelming talent. He claims that both Shine and Belua possess it. Shine accuses him of playing with them, but Evan counters that while ignoring him might feel better for now, it will never bring them true satisfaction. Bellowa chimes in asking what talent he's referring to and if she really has it too. Evan confirms they both possess the talent to grow stronger. Her mind flashes back to her mother, who used to apologize for giving birth to someone so weak. Shine finds this all too relatable, saying his own mother felt the exact same way. Our boy dismisses their mother's pity, explaining that their particular talent isn't something that's easily recognized. When Shine presses him on how he could possibly know something even their parents missed, Evan reveals he has a special talent of his own. Our protagonist claims his talent is finding geniuses just like the two standing before him. The girl grabs his sleeve, asking if she can truly become stronger, and he assures her she can. He explains that he can prove it, but he'll need 3 years of preparation. If they follow his orders for that period, he will show them results. If they're not satisfied, they'll be free to leave. He adds that as long as they stay with him, no one will ever disrespect them again. Shine protests, reminding him that they're slaves, but our boy swears on his name to keep his promise. He states that if the results are as promised, they must then follow his orders. Bellowa shrewdly observes that he's no philanthropist and must want something from them. Evan asks for their decision. Will they trust his words, prove their talent, and place their fate in his hands? In silence, the two children sit in the cell, the chains still fastened around their ankles. The boy declares he will survive, refusing to die like this. The girl quickly agrees, sharing his resolve. Evan asks one last time if they will entrust their fates to him. The children sit in silence until the boy finally lowers his head and says he wants to trust him. He recalls his mother's constant apologies for their weakness and his father's as well. Our boy promises that in 3 years they will thank their parents, feeling grateful and proud to have been born so strong and brave. The girl begins to cry and both kids cling to him. The headmaid spots them and instantly yells for the staff to get the children cleaned up and looked over. Outside, Dean asks the young master what he intends to do with them. He calmly replies that they will serve as his personal attendants for now, but eventually they will follow him into dangerous dungeons. The steward questions if that's wise, recalling their earlier conversation, but the young master's mind is clearly made up. Dean remarks on how expertly he managed to persuade them, especially for his age. He starts to say something about the nature of kids, but the young noble cuts him off, insisting he told them no lies. They will definitely become strong, and in 3 years, Deanie will see it too. The man relents, promising to send the children to him as soon as they are ready. Later, Evan greets them after they've been cleaned up, but Shine remains silent. He finally speaks, recalling Evan's earlier statement about wanting something in return for proving their talent. He asks what they will be required to do, wondering if it's just to remain as servants. The young master states he only wants one thing from them: to protect him. Both of them repeat his words confused, so he points to himself to clarify he's talking about himself. The boy replies that they're just kids, but our protagonist assures them they will become incredibly strong and wants them to use that strength to protect him. He adds that they will stay by his side at all times, except when training to guard him from danger by staying close. When Shine asks if he's anticipating a dangerous situation in the future, Evan calls the boy smart and confirms his suspicion. He confirms that there will indeed be danger, and that's precisely why he needs them. As the child begins to wonder aloud, the young master explains it's related to his personal training, which is kept secret from others and will be shown only to them. The girl pipes up that she wants to try, and he addresses her by name, promising that she'll be able to defeat monsters much scarier than this one. Now that he's told them what he wants, he says it's their turn to tell him what they want. They both repeat his words. Our boy tells them that if they protect him, he'll be bound to grant all their wishes. Introducing himself as Evan the Marquise's second son, he says they can ask for anything, whether it's treasure, a higher status, or even their freedom. He urges them to speak up and asks what they truly desire. With growing determination, the boy echoes Evan's words. He declares his desire is to kill all monsters. He shouts that he wants to kill every last one of them. The young demigod's hatred for monsters must have been etched into him from a very young age. Even back in the game, he was always burning with hatred toward monsters. Meanwhile, Shine meets Evan's gaze, and our protagonist assures him they'll do it his way, but insists it has to be done. He explains that to get stronger, he has to enter the dungeons. Shine hesitates, voicing his fear that he'll die inside because he's too weak. Evan's tone is confident as he tells him that if he follows his instructions to the letter, he will never die. Shine remains silent. Still, if this path is what it takes to get revenge on the monsters, he's willing to give it everything he has. Evan accepts without a second thought, telling him to go for it. Shine agrees, and the young master then turns to Bella and asks what she wants to do. In the game, she was a dangerous being who caused immense harm to humans, not a monster nor a demon, but a witch who relentlessly got in the player's way and forced them into a mandatory quest to kill her. He wonders how this tiny girl could one day become someone who sought the destruction of all humanity. She admits she doesn't know, explaining that she hates being cold or hungry and doesn't want to die. She confesses that she wants to become stronger, but beyond that, she has no idea what she truly desires. Evan gently raises a hand to reassure her, calling her name as he takes her hands. He reminds her she's only 7 years old and that it's completely normal not to know everything, yet telling her it isn't her fault. He says that whatever the answers are, they can find them together one step at a time. She agrees to try and find what she wants in life. Our boy then announces that from now on, he'll be providing them with a special training program. He figures that expecting them to handle it all at once is asking for too much. Since demigods level up much slower than humans even when they do, their progress is minimal. Although he's already planning the next steps, he knows that demigods have another way to grow stronger, and that path is through skills. He declares they'll start learning skills right away, telling them not to worry about definitions or types, since the main point is that mastering a skill makes you stronger. Some skills grant benefits the moment you learn them, like increasing stamina, mana, capacity, and physical abilities. These are passive skills that improve specific activities and provide permanent advantages like the Shurdan Knight's mastery of their signature swordsmanship. He adds that it not only improved their sword skills, but also permanently boosted their physical capabilities. Our boy hopes the weight training they're doing now will eventually develop into a similar kind of skill. Curious, the two children lean forward, asking if skills can really make them that much stronger. Evan explains that there are many ways to acquire skills, but tells them to focus on 2 methods for now. The first is repetition practicing until a skill becomes recognized as one of your own. The second is joining a specific group and learning its signature techniques over many years. He adds that they will use both methods to improve, noting that the reason servants in Demon War had such immense stamina and mana, despite their roles, was because noble households passed down powerful skills, giving talented servants a higher status. He continues stating that the higher the rank of the family, the more powerful the skills they possess. They listen closely as he explains that they are in a very good position. The Sharon family holds the rank of marquisate, and their household skills are considered the most traditional and outstanding in the entire kingdom. They wonder aloud if they'll really be able to learn those amazing skills. Evan replies that they can, but mastering them won't be easy. Unlike other servants, their current performance is far below average, which will slow down their skill growth. He explains that it will take them much more effort just to reach the same level as others. Still, if they can overcome these hardships, they will build a strong foundation of stamina and mana, which will lead to their growth and successful dungeon clearing. Finally, Evan concludes that they can only be shown the path. He can't walk it for them. When faced with the question of whether they can walk the path ahead, he never doubts them for a second, deciding that their trust and sincerity are all he needs. They agree. Standing before their master, the young master looks at the pair and asks how they are and if they can walk. The boy answers that he can, and the girl chimes in her agreement. Clapping his hands, our boy summons a blonde maid, who instantly appears, wondering what trivial complaint he has for her this time. Our boy quickly protests that he's not here to whine, explaining that he actually has a favor to ask. Pointing toward the 2 new kids, he asks if she would be willing to train them personally. Surprised, the maid echoes his request, asking if that's really the favor he meant. He explains that these children are extremely important, as one of them is destined to be by his side forever. He pleads with her, admitting that while they're a bit weak right now, they have immense talent, and urges her to take them under her wing. She agrees, deciding to personally train the girl, while having the head butler handle the boy, adding that the butler's rigorous methods will surely do the trick. A little later, Shine nervously asks what the head butler's like. But before anyone can answer, a figure approaches and asks if the young master called for him. Internally, Evan thinks the plan is simple. All he has to do is put on his cute act again to convince the man to take good care of Shine, even if it means sacrificing his own dignity. He calls out to the butler to ask for a favor, but at the same time, Shine is lost in a flashback of burning buildings and terrified screams. He remembers a voice screaming for him to run and the vow he made to survive and get revenge on the monsters responsible. A sharp voice snaps him back to reality, yelling at him to wake up. It's the head butler, demanding he pay attention. The butler barks at him again, telling him not to act so weak, after just a few hours of basic training, and warning that, at this rate, he isn't cut out for even the simplest duties of a Maris servant. He then sprints forward, reminding the boy that fundamental stamina is absolutely crucial, because a servant of the Shuren house must always be able to support their master. He warns that theory lessons are next, so Shine had better conserve his energy. After calling for a 10-minute break, the butler remarks to himself how satisfying it is to watch someone develop. Just then, Evan appears. The butler concedes the boy's stamina is lacking, but praises his talent in all other areas, noting he has good judgment, a sharp intellect, and a strong will to finish any task. Hearing this, Evan decides it's time to get serious with the training, reassuring the butler that he has plenty of healing artifacts. At that moment, a maid arrives to inform him that the Marquis is calling. The young master acknowledges her and heads inside. In the study, the Marquis expresses concern that Evan hasn't been playing outside much lately. Evan explains that he's been busy experimenting with his necklace to figure out its abilities. The Marquis listens patiently and simply advises his son to be careful not to get hurt. In the middle of their conversation, the Marquis reveals that the artifact is a growth type, meaning it can evolve along with its user and acquire new abilities when certain conditions are met. He admits that he wasn't aware of this property himself until the necklace officially recognized Evan as its owner. He then points to the necklace's jewel, asking if Evan can see the faint green glow in its center. The Marquis explains that once the entire jewel is glowing, the artifact will level up, and since it's already showing signs, it shouldn't take very long. Our boy recalls that in the original game, no one ever used this necklace, so he never imagined its growth type ability was so important. Now he can't help but wonder if his slimes will also get stronger when the necklace levels up. He's suddenly alarmed by the thought of them becoming too powerful to defeat with his bare fists. The last thing he wants is to be taken out by a slime, but he can't bring himself to stop training. He quickly shakes off his worries, figuring that even a leveled up slime is still just a slime after all. Afterward, the Marquis brings up that Evan spent his entire allowance to hire the new servants, and asks if he did it out of pity. Evan replies that it wasn't pity, but certainty, believing the two will grow strong enough to protect him, which is why he entrusted their training to the head maid and head butler. The Marquis says he'll trust his son's judgment, but warns him that from now on, those two servants are his sole responsibility. Evan readily agrees, proudly declaring that the two of them are already his people. 3 months later, Shine and Balawa stand before the young master, neatly dressed in their new servant and maid uniforms. Under the head butler's watchful gaze, Evan carefully examines their progress. The head butler remarks that, while they aren't perfect yet, their stamina is now on par with the other servants. The young master asks just how hard they were trained, recalling that newcomers unfamiliar with dungeons usually take about 3 years to adapt. Yet these two managed it in only 3 months. Speaking firmly, Evan declares that if they were to fail, the fault would be his, not theirs. The girl chimes in that she worked very hard, and the butler suggests they now train for only half the day, spending the other half with the young master. Evan agrees, explaining that his plan was always to keep them by his side. He then hints that he has something else in mind, prompting the butler to assure him that he'll prepare whatever is needed. A large box is soon brought before them, and the young noble reveals he has a special advantage he can use to pick their gear. Opening the box, he announces that the first items they'll need are a set of twin daggers for Shine and a lamp for Belawa. A moment later, Shine is gripping a pair of brilliant golden daggers, while his partner Belawa holds a mysterious lamp. Evan explains that they aren't just ordinary tools, but powerful artifacts. He remembers how they were overlooked in the game, but knowing their true value, he demonstrates their power. He dashes forward, spinning in graceful arcs as the daggers slice through the air, ultimately splintering a tree trunk with their force. He then asks Shine if he memorized the move. Shine eagerly confirms recognizing it as the quickest path to mastering twin daggers. Evan explains that the technique is called beehive felling. The young master demonstrates the form, starting by crossing the blades to block, then guarding as he bends his knees and flows into a downward swing. He emphasizes the importance of perfect timing, explaining that the motion is canceled midway to eliminate any wasted effort. Shine quickly mimics the movement, and the protagonist explains that canceling means cutting the action mid-command to allow for faster repetition. Evan tells him to just trust and follow his lead. Shine nods, gripping both daggers and matching Evan's rhythm. He drills the sequence nonstop until his footwork becomes sharp and his arcs are clean, mastering the basics of twin daggers in just a single day. Meanwhile, Belawa is working indoors with the lamp, as Evan observes. He explains that the lamp can be used to train her mana capacity control skill through repeated activation. He adds that since mana capacity control is the most vital skill for a mage, to develop continuously using the lamp makes it possible to both learn and improve it. It influences everything: spell incantation speed, spell force, mana, recovery rate, and even total mana capacity. On top of that, every time she activates the lamp, her fire affinity increases slightly with no upper limit. This means, as her familiarity with flames grows, so will her ability to wield even more powerful ones, making the lamp the perfect training tool for her. Just as she's about to turn it on, feeling a bit competitive with Shine, she's interrupted by Redine. Redine asks about the lamp, and Balawa quickly addresses her as Madam. Redine remarks that it's an antique that shouldn't have been taken from the storehouse. She suddenly realizes Balawa is the child Evan brought home and wonders if he's the one who gave her the lamp. The girl explains that he told her it would help improve her mana control. Redine nods, musing that Evan gave a difficult-to-use artifact to teach basics despite having no magic talent himself. Balawa immediately jumps to his defense, insisting he isn't untalented at all. Redine offers to help with her training, calling it witch training, but tells her to keep it a secret from Evan. Afterward, the second stage of special training goes smoothly. Balawa repeatedly activates the magic lamp, leveling up her mana capacity control and increasing her overall proficiency. Shine also continues to hone his twin dagger techniques, practicing by canceling the beehive felling movement midway through the animation. During this time, the protagonist has mastered summoning slimes with both hands, showing he can now control them simultaneously. He holds Mirasol's necklace, recalling his plan to finally remove it once he reaches a certain existence level. He realizes it's a growth-type artifact, which means the slimes he summons are also becoming stronger. They're harder to kill, but they grant much more experience. Considering this new opportunity, he decides that what he needs now isn't another item, but a new skill. With that in mind, Evan begins Immortality Project number 3, summoning slimes with both hands. Evan launches into his third Immortality Project. This time it's Myriad Poison Immunity. He's determined to build up his tolerance until no toxin can ever threaten his life again. The only problem is the cost. The poisons he needs are so expensive that without the head butler's approval, the family funds are completely out of reach. Mabel overhears this and asks what he plans to use the money for. Evan explains that he can't make her a servant in the way she expects, but he suggests they work together instead. She tilts her head in confusion, so he reveals his true plan: he's going to start a business. Not long after, his older brother Eric arrives and asks what kind of favor he wants. Evan immediately brings up the city inspection assignment their father entrusted to Eric. It's a duty where the Sheridan heirs walk through the city to learn firsthand what it means to lead. Evan explains that he wants to help, and Eric agrees. Evan slides a paper across the table. As Eric studies the notes, he wonders if this is just information Evan heard from others. Evan answers that he reached all the conclusions himself. Eric has to admit they seem accurate. He realizes the document details every notable event in the city from the past 6 months. Each incident is analyzed with its cause and effect, along with predictions for in-demand supplies, new products, and even simple recipes using common ingredients. Evan explains that he wants to use this information to start a small business, both to earn some money and to learn more about the city. Impressed, Eric advises that they take the proposal to their father for approval. Before the Manhwa, Evan presents his plan. However, their father quickly points out that the proposal is far too ambitious for a small business and warns Evan that he can't possibly handle it all on his own. Evan replies that he only intends to focus on one part. When pressed, he admits he'll handle the medicine side of things, asking his father to manage the rest. Reading deeper, the Marquis realizes the document was intentionally written to be informative from the start. He narrows his eyes and asks if this was Evan's true intention, but Evan insists it was just to prove his determination. The Marquis glances at Eric, questioning if this child is really his son, and Eric shoots back that perhaps he should be asking if this boy is truly his brother. Evan slaps the papers onto the desk, declaring that they'll need to call a meeting with the vassals. The Marquis responds that it's time to expand the business Evan has already been running. When the vassals gather, some argue that the plan would be better received without a child's name attached, while others insist the contents alone make it worthwhile. One man questions why Evan wants to pursue the medicine trade when it generates the least profit. The Marquis confirms this, recalling his son's explanation that the industry has stagnated because priests have a monopoly on healing. Our boy points out that their first duty to the citizens is providing medicine. He explains that the temple avoids treating injuries by any means other than divine power, ensuring all donations flow directly to them. As a result, only dungeon explorers or the wealthy can afford treatment, while ordinary people are often left to die waiting. He explains that medicine is the only solution in emergencies. If they can develop the industry and stabilize the production of minor healing potions, they can be sold cheaply, lowering the death rate across the slums. With resolve, he declares that he is moving forward with the plan. The Marquis answers firmly, stating they will proceed with his own name on the line, and that if they do, the temple won't be able to interfere. Evan hesitates, asking if that's really safe since the temple is the state religion, but his father reassures him that it's fine. He promises to negotiate directly even before the emperor if necessary, and declare that it is all for the sake of the citizens. He authorizes the expansion of the business, the creation of new items, and the founding of the pharmacy. Evan thanks him respectfully, though his true aim remains unchanged, to gather every poison and herb in existence and train his body to complete immunity, guaranteeing his survival now that he has the Marquis's permission. Construction begins immediately. In no time at all, the building stands ready. However, pharmacists are nowhere to be found because this territory belongs to the temple. Their interference infuriates Evan, reminding him of his past in Demon War 3, where their disruptions made herb collection harder, dungeons more dangerous, and potions nearly impossible to secure, forcing the hero to either recruit an alchemist or learn the craft himself. To solve the issue, he decides to make the potions personally. Though he doubts anyone would buy medicine from a 9-year-old a new idea forms, he decides he could study under a pharmacist show rapid progress to earn their trust and then secretly run things from behind the scenes, with the added benefit of already having a potion recipe from the game to pass off as his own. When Shine enters, Evan immediately asks if he's found someone. Shine admits he hasn't, but explains that he located a man who can find people for them. A bald man appears carrying papers, and our protagonist recognizes him as the head of the slave market. The man explains that there are many pharmacists outside the city and hands over a list of names, advising him to consider his choices carefully. Evan's eyes lock onto one specific entry, Bernard Garcia, age 63. Without hesitation, he demands the man bring Bernard to him. 4 days later, Shine escorts Bernard to the mansion, where the older man introduces himself bluntly. The broker also presents an assistant, a young woman in a maid outfit, who introduces herself as Hannah. Shine chastises Bernard for disrespecting the young master, but the old man retorts until Evan calmly introduces himself directly. The man responds that he should just call him Grandpa Bernard. After thanking the broker for his efforts and reminding him to secretly continue searching for demigod children, Evan dismisses him. Seeing all this, Bernard wonders if this person before him is truly just a child. In response, Evan reveals his age, drawing a laugh from the pharmacist, who then asks what he wants. When pressed, the old man admits that actually helping is another matter altogether. Bernard recalls the rumors that our boy knows alchemy beyond his own understanding and warns there will be consequences if that claim is false. Unfazed, Evan proposes a deal. If he can show him something new, Bernard must stay and work with him for at least 5 years. Bernard agrees, but adds that if Evan fails, he must become his apprentice and reveal all his secrets. Confident, Evan accepts without hesitation. They ride to the new pharmacy, the carriage stopping before the grand building. Evan declares that this will be Bernard's new workplace. Inside, Bernard insists on seeing the alchemy right away, but Evan first leads them into the medicine production room, where rows of vibrant purple plants are growing in incubators. He places potion bottles nearby and explains his method for incubating medicinal herbs. He calls it a cheating potion for its speed and simplicity, though it comes with strict requirements based on knowledge from the end of Demon War. Holding the potion, Evan asks if Bernard knew of it. The old man admits he didn't, repeating the name in disbelief as Hannah echoes the term. With both of them stunned by the technique, Evan clarifies that rarer herbs take longer, and that repeated use wears out the soil, requiring a fresh plot of land. But even with these limitations, the potion enables large-scale herb production. Bernard reflects ruefully that he believed no new potion could exist, and now a child has taught him something he never knew. With a small smile, he remarks that his remaining years are going to be quite enjoyable. At last, Evan presents a contract for 50 years instead of 5, urging Bernard to sign. As the weight of the revelation settles, the old man reaches for the quill. Afterward, Evan gets back to work on the lore book for Demon War, keeping up his routine as he updates the character list. Later, the group gathers with their supply of potions and herbs. At Evan's signal, the meeting begins, and he explains that their first priority is to gather every medicinal herb from the city. He adds that they'll slowly expand their collection area later, noting that adventurers will often part with their unused herbs. Bernard suggests sharing sample potions with herb sellers, and Evan quickly agrees. He points out that producing a cheaper, easy-to-store potion would allow them to distribute it across the entire city. Evan reflects privately that even selling cheaply will bring in a profit because although the margins start small, their steady growth will eventually support citywide distribution. Bernard worries about potential interference from competitors, only to be reassured that the Maris family's influence will prevent any problems. Meanwhile, since Evan can't visit, daily he arranges for Hannah to assist Bernard directly. He then calls for Mabel, explaining that it will be difficult for him to be the face of the pharmacy himself, so she must act as the official representative of the business in his place. When asked if she can handle such a responsibility, Mabel falls silent for a moment before replying that she has been preparing ever since the idea was first mentioned. She tells him to leave it all to her, vowing to help in a matter where his honor is at stake, and promising to stop anything that might get in their way. Pleased with her determination, Evan also decides she will manage the herb storage, which includes overseeing the gathering of ingredients for potions. 1 week later, a crowd gathers outside as the pharmacy becomes a sudden success, with customers flooding the shop and trading herbs for minor healing potions. Bernard Garcia's reputation builds trust and demand grows rapidly. Mabel reports that they'll be buying both medicinal and poisonous herbs in exchange for potions, which draws in even more suppliers. Evan notes that people are praising the potion's effects, and one warrior even boasts that it works better than a priest's healing. Bernard proudly replies that no ordinary alchemist would dare stake their name so boldly. Elsewhere in the building, the Marquis examines a report and asks if the numbers shown are revenue, only to be told it's actually pure profit after costs and wages have been deducted. The reply leaves him stunned as he realizes just how much his son has achieved. With the pharmacy's success, 2 more pharmacists are hired through the Trade Guild. Soon all the herbs in Dungeon City are being funneled to them, while collectors and alchemists from across the nation arrive in Sharan to buy their stock. Soon after, this development leads to the creation of a purple skull-marked poison tea. When asked if it is safe, Evan reassures everyone by explaining it is made with precise ratios of medicinal and poisonous herbs to build resistance, then calmly drinks it himself. Mabel warns he might die if he keeps drinking it, but he replies that he drinks it precisely so that he won't die. He then offers it to Shine and asks if he wants to give it a try. Shine hesitates and asks to pass, but Bellowa quickly volunteers, making the maid shout for her to stop fearing everyone will die if they start copying him. At that moment, she realizes it is already March and blurts out that Evan's 10th birthday is coming soon. This makes him realize that it has already been a year since he became Evan. With his formal training as a noble about to take over his days, he knows there will be no more time for this kind of practice. Shine then wonders if they can just tell everyone the truth. But Evan firmly refuses, remembering his failures after trying everything to grow stronger in his past life. Shine suggests they go to the dungeon instead, but Evan refuses, again saying neither he, Shine, nor Bellowa are ready for it. When Shine presses further, asking why not, Evan points out they still have 2 years left on their agreed-upon deadline, declaring they will only go once everything is perfectly ready. Shine protests that they have gotten much stronger, but Evan cuts him off sharply, telling him he still has a long way to go. Taking a moment to reflect, Evan tells Shine and Bellowa that they've grown so much over the past year. He recalls how at first they were just happy to be on par with kids their own age before getting a little cocky about surpassing them. Shine immediately denies being cocky, insisting he'd never act that way in front of his young master. Evan warns him that even highly trained soldiers can meet their end in a dungeon, but quickly adds that there's still plenty of time for them to improve. He urges him not to rush things and to prepare thoroughly to make sure nothing can go wrong. Evan asks if Shine can be patient, and he agrees. Meanwhile, Bella tells Evan to be gentler, only for a baffled Shine to point out that she's only 8 years old. Later on, Mabel brings over a box of green herbs, explaining that it's the weekly batch of poisons and medicines. Evan recognizes it as Pattern F and gives her a firm thank you. She relays Bernard's concern that they're short-staffed, which sparks an idea in Evan adding Hannah as an assistant pharmacist. Mabel praises the suggestion, noting the girl's steady growth. Evan then asks about the temple, and Shine explains that their construction project in the Central District is making people anxious. Mabel confirms that she has already reported this to the Marquis. When she asks if he's still obsessed with slime training, Evan just muses aloud about needing to kill slimes before they can even scream. Mabel suggests an artifact that grants gripping power. Shine dismisses the idea at first, but then remembers an artifact that increases strength and should be easy to get. Mabel recalls its connection to the Bloodstained Fist event from the Second Demon War and warns that there are a lot of tricky conditions attached to it. As the memory plays out, Evan recalls a random event that triggers once he becomes close with Shine One, where the game forces his birthday to fall on a certain date. In that event, Shine presents him with blood-stained gloves, claiming they make him feel stronger. If Evan accepts them, his attacks weaken, his skills fail, monsters overwhelm him, and he dies. And if he refuses, Shine keeps the gloves, they enter a dungeon anyway, and Evan still dies when his magic suddenly fails. Both choices lead to tragedy. The artifact does boost strength, but it also nullifies the power of any weapon, only granting its enhancement when fighting barehanded. Armed with this knowledge, he realizes the artifact is perfect for him. It won't backfire against slimes since he plans to fight them barehanded anyway. Full of renewed energy, he rallies the group to go shopping. Steering Mabel away from a fancy-looking shop, he explains that the artifacts sold there are all fakes, reminding everyone that real dungeon explorers never sell true artifacts in regular stores. Shine Curious asks what they do with them instead. Evan explains that they either use the artifacts themselves, auction them off at exclusive gatherings, or end up getting robbed for them. It's all driven by temptation. Shine is shocked that so much drama surrounds a single item, but Evan confirms it, noting that one artifact can change a person's entire destiny. Shine insists that kind of temptation wouldn't work on him, and Bellois agrees, proudly stating that his loyalty to his master would never waver. Evan admits it's hard for him to make the same boast, but he thanks them sincerely before rejoining the group, who ask where they're headed next. Full of determination, Evan says there are still a few places he wants to check, though he isn't sure if what he's looking for is still there. Finally, he points ahead and announces their destination. Raising a finger, Evan explains that some dungeon explorers actually try to eat monster corpses despite the fact that they're often poisonous. Even outside the dungeon, he continues controlling both the poison and the mana within a monster's corpse is nearly impossible. He adds that only authorized individuals are allowed to consume them. Everyone else has to smuggle them out in secret. Evan mentions a rumor that eating mana-filled monsters can make you stronger, but he quickly clarifies that it's just a myth. Shine remarks that if it were true, their young master would have already made them eat some by now. Evan muses that eating the poison might build resistance, but the maid immediately warns him never to even think about it. Our boy reassures her he won't, making it clear their trip to the butcher shop isn't actually to buy meat. At the Dual Blade butcher shop, the owner peers out suspiciously, asking who's there. Evan meets his gaze directly and says there's no need to waste time since they both know why he's really here. The man admits he'd heard rumors that his visitor wasn't an ordinary person, and now he can see it's true. He invites Evan inside. The butcher notes that someone as important as him clearly isn't here to buy or sell meat. Leaning across the counter, the butcher asks if Evan is there to bust him, but the young master simply points to an item in the butcher's hand. Evan explains that the man is holding something incredibly valuable without even realizing it. He then offers a deal. If the butcher hands it over, Evan can wipe his slate clean. However, the butcher refuses, saying there's no point in pretending to be an honest man now. Evan, recalling he's met people like this before, warns him that an item like that will never reveal its true power to someone unworthy. Our boy then mentions the butcher's long-buried dream of becoming a chef, which leaves the man stunned, especially when Evan brings up the legendary monster chef of the kingdom. He dangles a second chance in front of him, but only if he cooperates. The silence stretches on before the owner finally asks what it is he really wants. Back at the mansion, Shine and Balawa reach out, placing their hands on a sword and a crimson gem resting on the table. Evan thinks back to their earlier stops at the Crimson Stir Fry and the Orc Bar, where they picked up these artifacts. Any items they still have are considered a successful haul, but interestingly, neither the sword nor the gem had bonded with an owner. Until now. Shine grips the blade immediately, sensing its powerful magic. Meanwhile, Balawa touches the gem and feels a distinct warmth. As their master watches in silence, he knows exactly why these items haven't responded to anyone else. Shine lifts the sword, wondering aloud if maybe it just wasn't recognized as an artifact. Evan confirms he's on the right track, but encourages them to dig a little deeper. Evan reveals that he chose these two items specifically because, among all of Sheetan's hidden artifacts, they had bugged possession settings. He breaks down the glitch for them to control the dual blades. Twin blood, you're supposed to touch the crimson plate. And to control the jade flame sphere, you have to touch the twin blood. It was a simple programming error that swapped their possession conditions. He recalls how in his past life he'd followed the official guidebook to a T and failed every single time, wasting years on quests, only to realize the game's code practically mocked him. That's why he made sure to get both items at the same time. Evan points out that on top of everything, these are the best weapon artifacts you can find in all of Shiran. Bellois seems to accept his explanation, but Shine is still skeptical, which prompts their young master to instruct them to swap artifacts and try again, assuring them that this time they'll get what they're looking for. The moment they switch, there's an incredible surge of power. A brilliant light floods Shine's sword while crimson flames erupt around Balawa. In the end, both companions hold their rightful artifacts, leaving Evan to remark on how strange it is that a bug from the game still exists in this world. He compares it to following an old recipe and having the dish turn out even better than expected, concluding that the quality of these artifacts is way beyond what you'd get from a normal item summon. He's left completely baffled, unsure of what to make of this world anymore. Evan has a flashback to his old life sitting at his computer, remembering that this entire world was once the game he loved to play. He starts to question everything. Is he a real person now? Is any of this actually real? Meanwhile, Balawa holds the glowing red sphere, explaining its complicated seal as Shine inspects the twin blades in his hands. Evan realizes that what he always thought was a simple glitch might actually be a feature, just another way to look at things. When the swordsman asks if something's wrong, Evan just smiles and says he's glad they're happy, then thanks them both, catching them completely off guard. Shine asks why on earth he's thanking them, but Balawa chimes in saying they're the ones who should be thanking him for such an incredible gift. This gets Shine to finally express his own gratitude, followed by Balawa, who respectfully calls him young master. Maintaining his composure, Evan says it's time to begin and places a pair of gloves on the desk. Evan explains that he bought them at the Orc Pub for a hefty price. He grimly recalls that in the game, these exact gloves were linked to the deaths of both the main character and himself. Remembering that awful scene, he clenches the gloves tightly, noting his own growth thanks to Mirasol's necklace. It's already saved him from countless potential deaths. The moment he slips the gloves on, they change color. A surge of purple energy erupts around him, power flooding his body as spheres of energy form in his palms. The numbers climb 0.5, then 0.7, until he crushes the orb in his hand, releasing a blinding flash of light. And just like that, the young master defeats the slime. He's now certain he can add slime training to his daily routine. But then his necklace begins to glow brightly, drawing his attention. It seems his Mirror Soul's necklace has just leveled up. When he goes back to fighting the slimes, he notices it's suddenly taking a full second longer to beat each one. The realization hits him almost instantly. If the necklace got stronger, then the slimes it summons must have gotten stronger too. Understanding this new challenge, he recognizes that an item won't be enough anymore. What he needs now is a skill. Seeing no other way forward, he calls for Mabel. When she enters, he instructs her to bring him tea with an extra dose of poison, which she promptly delivers. Holding the cup, he reflects that he's already fulfilled one of the conditions thanks to his extensive poison resistance training. He downs the tea, feeling the venom surge through his body, and decides it's finally time to train the Devil's Attack, the dreaded final strike from the game Demon War that instantly kills opponents by hitting their weakest point. While most people think of it as just a finishing move, he knows about its hidden potential. It can be used on enemies at full health as long as the exact conditions are met, making it one of the most difficult skills in the game to master. Calculating his next move, he reviews the conditions he's already cleared. There's the level gap between him and the target, not to mention his strikes count as weaponless thanks to the blood-stained leather gloves, which aren't considered a weapon. The target also has to be at full health, which is where Mirasol's necklace comes into play. He explains the next challenge is the fourth condition: the enemy must be completely unaware. He plans to pull this off by attacking the slime the very instant it appears. On top of all that, another requirement is that he must be under a debuff, a condition easily met thanks to his poison resistance training. But the real struggle is the execution. Unlike in the game where he could just press a few buttons here, he has to synchronize his body, the summoning, and the strike, all by pure instinct. He reminds himself over and over that he has no choice but to pull this off. A few days later, a worried Mabel asks Bernard for a muscle pain relief potion. The old alchemist offers to whip some up, and she's relieved that the pharmacy is so well stocked. Curious, he asks why the young master would need such medicine. She explains worriedly that he's been pushing himself to the limit, skipping meals and sleep, while training endlessly for something. Bernard remarks that it sounds like he's been screaming day and night, and she frets over how much longer he can keep it up. Outside his room, people knock on the door and call his name, urging him to open up and asking if he's okay. Inside, Evan collapses to the floor, gasping for breath. Flashing back a few days, Mabel had offered him a potion and a pill while asking about his new training method involving kicks. Evan confirms her suspicion, explaining that the Devil's Attack works by canceling a regular strike to guarantee the final hit, lands a technique known as a cancel, similar to how Shine uses his dual daggers. The tricky part, he says, is deciding which attack to lead with. He adds that for now, he thinks kicking is the best option since he needs to keep both hands free to kill slimes. He adds that perfectly timing the slime's summoning only adds another layer of difficulty to the move. Evan also admits how much harder it is to execute these moves with his actual body compared to just mashing keys on a keyboard. Mabel confesses that she doesn't understand all his weird gamer talk, but she wishes him the best of luck anyway. He thanks her for the encouragement, promising to do his best, but gently tells her to return to her duties when she offers to stay and watch. Back in the present, someone calls from outside, pleading for him to at least show his face. The protagonist tells himself he can't compromise now, swearing he will master the devil's attack before his 10th birthday. He knows there's no way he's going to die as a nameless extra in this game world. As Evan lets out a scream of exertion, a frustrated Shine slams his hands on his desk and declares he can't take this anymore. He admits he doesn't know how powerful this devil's attack is, but he's afraid something terrible will happen to young Master Evan at this rate. Bellois answers calmly, reassuring him that if it's something Evan truly needs to do, he will accomplish it on his own. Meanwhile, Mabel hurries down the hall carrying a box full of potions. She stops short outside the door when she notices the usual sounds of his training have gone silent. Mabel knocks frantically, and soon Radine and the Marquis rush over, calling out his name repeatedly. When the Marquis demands the key, she explains the door is magically sealed, so only Evan can open it from the inside. Radine calls through the door, reminding him what an important day it is, and asking if he finally achieved what he was working for. At last, footsteps are heard from inside. The door opens and Evan steps out to meet them. Radine moves forward with open arms, warmly wishing him a happy 10th birthday as the gathered servants look on. Shine and Belua call out in surprise, and Eric rushes closer to ask if he's truly all right. After a moment's pause, Evan assures them he's fine and promises he'll stay that way. He then turns to the Marquis to request an artifact from the storage as a birthday gift and a reward for his success. As the scene shifts, a small building signals the next step in his plan. Its display case holds a pair of gorgeous crystal-like earrings. Later, an elderly instructor reacts with delight, praising Evan's quick understanding. Our boy admits it's still difficult, even with Yo Bandman's memories. He reflects that in most isekai stories, reincarnated characters are usually academic prodigies. But for him, even these simple lessons feel like a struggle. Guided by his teacher, he tackles noble family trees, foreign relations, and the intricate web of aristocratic ties, knowing how easily such knowledge could trigger death flags. Memories of the Second Demon War remind him of countless ways he could die, many of which are tied to foreign nobles. For a moment, he even considers scarring his own face, though Mabel protests that it's too handsome to ruin. Shine asks if he's certain about choosing just the earrings, but Evan insists they are what he wants most. Grateful for his new family, he selects the Snow Mountain Spirit earrings, an artifact that accelerates mana recovery, preparing himself for the next stage with them now in his possession. During his training, the sessions grow longer, and Shine points out that he's finally old enough to begin weapon practice. Evan explains that he has yet to find a weapon that suits him and can't remove his gloves yet, which makes one of his hands useless for combat. Balawa insists that strength is key for dungeon survival, but Evan counters that as a noble, his focus should be on what's most practical. For the time being, he decides to train in hand-to-hand combat until he finds the perfect weapon for himself. He's convinced he might be suited for something unconventional and resolves to try everything he comes across, aiming to make a decision within 2 years. Watching from the sidelines is Knight Captain Michael D. Haylock of the Sharon Marquis family, the renowned leader of the Iron Wall Knights sworn to protect them. Evan approaches, remembering that in the game, the captain was only slightly more important than him. In reality, however, the man is incredibly intimidating. He recalls that Michael is fated to die protecting the Marquis family when the Demon King's 4 divas invade an event that leads to both of them perishing as the family falls to ruin. When training starts, our protagonist arrives for his combat practice. He's surprised when the captain announces he's there for the very same reason. Evan is utterly confused by this right up until Michael rips his shirt off and declares he'll be personally training him in combat from this day forward. He praises the boy for focusing on fighting above all else and admits he's surprised that it's Evan of all people. Panicked Evan tries to explain that there's been a misunderstanding, but the knight insists he is the best teacher in the city, possibly the entire nation, and refuses to be dissuaded. When Evan hesitates, pointing out how busy the captain must be, Michael simply brushes it aside, claiming his new student is more important than anything else. He suggests they start with the easy stuff as he moves closer, leaving our protagonist scrambling to back away. A month later, Evan is resting under a shady tree when Shine joins him. Balawa approaches to offer him a cloth to wipe his sweat, which he gratefully accepts. Shine mutters, wondering if there's one for him too, but all the attention remains fixed on Evan. Nearby, Michael explains he'll be gone starting tomorrow to clear dungeons for the upcoming backwash, instructing Evan to train on his own in the meantime. Our protagonist recalls that the knight usually steered clear of dungeons, but Michael explains that watching Evan's growth has inspired him to push himself. He admits he still wants to improve even at his age. The boy calls it a good thing, adding that greater strength helps in both learning and protecting the Marquis family. As they talk, the captain describes the effort involved, avoiding traps, finding the right path, and battling monsters. Evan questions if that isn't just another kind of effort. Michael clarifies that leveling up in a dungeon is different, but Evan places a hand on his chest and shares his belief that dungeon rewards are simply another form of compensation for one's efforts. He compares it to strength training, where risking your life to explore dungeons results in level increases as the prize. Evan also declares that time doesn't matter, because God judges and grants blessings fairly. There's no difference between the effort of training and the effort of dungeoneering, since the results always match what you put in. He concludes that strong performances in dungeons yield great results and asks if the captain agrees. Michael says that's all the answer he needs, admitting he feels foolish for avoiding dungeons for so long, and realizing the rewards just come in another form, one that can be trusted since they are granted by God. Before leaving, the knight promises to repay Evan, but the boy just asks for slightly lighter training when he returns. Michael instead vows to use every method he knows to teach him after the dungeon. Evan thinks to himself that this is the exact opposite of what he was hoping for. The knight instructs the others to raid dungeons with enthusiasm and to increase their training intensity and preparation. His friend echoes the determination, saying they can't just sit back and watch. Shine adds that he'll be intensifying the captain's training as well. Our boy becomes swamped with slime practice lectures and combat drills. Several days later, on a Friday afternoon, Evan meets with the tradesman now that the knight has already departed for the dungeon. At the meeting, the bald merchant greets Evan and announces that he has brought the children they discussed last time. The boy introduces himself as Paul, and the girl simply asks to be called Mary. Our protagonist wonders privately if they might have changed their names before appearing in the game. He instructs Mabel to get them washed up and guided to their rooms, which she accepts, though he immediately clarifies that it's not what she's thinking. To prove his point, he explains that Paul and Mary are demigods thanking the tradesman for the investment. The merchant then hands over investigation reports on the people Evan had requested, specifically the key figures of the demon wars. He realizes this won't be as easy as his dealings with the Bernard family. He is aware that most of these characters aren't active at this stage, and even the name and past of Demon War II's main character remain unknown. Resolved, he decides to continue his work regardless. When Shine asks if he's really fine with just that, Evan answers that he is. He also explains that he'll help the others later if they show up. While looking over the names on the request, Shine resolves to support the fight against the villains plaguing the world, and asks Evan aloud if he plans to be on the front lines himself. But Evan shakes his head, replying that he's merely an extra, who will quietly provide support with items and preparation from the sidelines rather than stepping into battle. When they're interrupted, Benoit suddenly announces that it's time for class. Evan screams, having completely forgotten. Later, the old alchemist calls his name. Evan calmly eats his shaved ice until Bernard finally asks if there has been a problem at the pharmacy since summer began. Confused, our boy asks him to explain what he means. Bernard clarifies that he's concerned about the uniforms being too warm for the season, saying he feels bad for the employees forced to wear winter attire in the heat. He argues that considering the season is essential, and proudly declares that he is still the best alchemist on the continent. In response, Evan tells him he can't leave his duties entirely to him forever, and needs to draw more on his own abilities. Hannah soon arrives with shaved ice, prompting Evan to ask if her uniform is too warm. She insists it's fine, but he points out the heat and apologizes for realizing so late, promising to request a summer version when he returns to the mansion. She thanks him, as he reminds her to approach him or Mabel anytime she needs anything. Feeling moved, Bernard says he appreciates Evan taking such good care of the pharmacy staff and expresses his desire to repay the favor. Our boy asks if he's being sincere. The alchemist explains that although he has the knowledge, his body skills and mana can no longer keep up. He adds that this imbalance can be corrected if Evan learns directly from him, since alchemy is something anyone can study. Bernard tells our boy to come for an hour each day and to fetch the training materials himself, warning him not to be difficult about it. That night, a shadowy figure approaches, a grand hall where a nun seeks out the bishop, asking if he is aware of the recently opened Brothers Pharmacy. The bishop's face twists with fury as he slams his hand on the armrest, cursing the pharmacy for drastically cutting into their donations. In his rage, he insists they are mocking the will of God with underhanded tricks, swearing that he will never allow such insults to go unpunished. When class ends, Hannah peeks into the room and asks if Evan's lesson is finished, only to see him collapse onto the floor. Bernard looks down at him and remarks that if Evan weren't so busy, he could teach him all day. The protagonist jokes it will take 50 years at this pace, then insists he has other matters to attend to and rushes out. While Bernard muses that the boy could surpass him in just 5 years, the alchemist notes that as his disciple grows stronger, he himself is becoming a better teacher. Bernard wonders if it might still be too early for potion lessons. Hannah explains she came by because there are fewer customers, adding that the temple has been holding a free blessing event for several days. At the temple, a nun reports to the bishop that visits to Brothers Pharmacy have dropped, and he smugly says things are returning to normal. She warns that it's only temporary and questions making enemies over something so reckless. But he replies that this isn't about right or wrong. The bishop rants that donations have been falling ever since Brothers Pharmacy opened, blaming the Count's family for drawing in both civilians and explorers. Claiming it's all to restore the Mother Goddess's authority, he refuses to reconsider. The nun warns him not to interfere with the pharmacy since it's connected to the Count, which could cause trouble on a national level. He brushes it off and decides he will simply avoid involving the Count's family directly. She protests that the pharmacy's workers are innocent, yet he brushes her off again, insisting he never intended to have them killed. Outraged, she yells that she can't endure this any longer. Later, the nun sits drinking at a bar, venting about how the bishop is just using his authority as an excuse when he's really only after money. She complains the free blessing plan is meaningless and grumbles that they're the ones doing all the work. From nearby, our protagonist comments that she must really like meat skewers and offers to buy her some. She's shocked when he calls her by her full name, Priestess Servina Bin. She drinks even harder, cursing the bishop. Servina grumbles drunkenly about the priesthood in the temple, even wondering if she should abandon it all to become a freelance priestess under the Count's family. Evan turns back to her and offers her a position as a priestess affiliated with him, promising unlimited support. With hesitation, Servina admits it would be nice, but says she can't accept. When he asks why, she explains she promised herself she would make the temple a better place. Evan replies that there is nothing she can do to change things now. Servina concedes, saying she has already angered the bishop enough to be on the verge of being expelled. Evan figures out it's because she's been stuck here ever since being cast out of the main body. He considers just letting things be, but then he thinks about how he changed Shine and Bella's futures and figures he can change hers for the better too. Calling out to her, he asks why she doesn't try relying on someone else if she can't change things all on her own. She looks totally confused by his question, so he explains they should talk more about the real problem and how to solve it together. Evan stands with Dine before the gathered employees, giving them a heads up about a potential ambush, but reassuring them they'll be protected. He reminds them that since they're official guests of the city, their safety is the host's responsibility. Dean chimes in, affirming that every worker from Brothers Pharmacy represents the Marquis family, and any harm to them is an attack on the family itself. One of the employees asks who would be crazy enough to even try something like that. Evan replies that it's obvious, declaring that the Order of the Great Bishop is planning to cause trouble for Brothers Pharmacy. Some wonder if the bishop has a death wish for targeting the Marquis family, while others realize that's exactly why they've become the target. Someone connects the dots, realizing the recent free blessings were just a ploy to sabotage their business. Our boy dismisses the reasoning, saying the why doesn't matter because we already have a counterplan ready. In response, Bernard explains that many workers have been practicing potion making with leftover herbs, but the quality isn't quite good enough to sell, at least by his standards. He suggests they give them away to ball the poorer areas for emergencies. He vows to personally check every single potion for safety and warns that anyone whose batch fails will be on herb duty timeout for a while. The employees cheer at the generous idea, but the alchemist waves it off, saying it's not a competition and will only last as long as they have extra potions. Getting back to the real threat, Evan, Yao points out that this charity event gives the temple the perfect opportunity to strike while they're working outside the pharmacy. Bernard counters that they can use this as bait to expose the temple's corruption. Our boy agrees, but stresses they must prepare carefully so the temple can't deny anything. He then unrolls some documents from an anonymous source about the temple, which even include a list of the knights expected to take part in the ambush. He urges the group to keep a close eye on those knights and to capture them alive. He tells Dine to share the list with the other knights before giving the official order to begin the operation. Later, Evan is out and about, cheerfully announcing the temple's free blessings alongside their own free potions, joking that only good things are happening in Shiran. Over in the slums, a worker from Brothers Pharmacy shouts about free potions and encourages everyone to get in line. Residents happily drink the potions and share them with the children. Denis remarks that he didn't realize they'd made so many potions during training, adding that it's enough for the entire slum. An elderly woman gratefully thanks the young master, saying the chest pain she'd had since yesterday has already completely faded. As they walk, Dean comments on how much everyone likes Evan, noting that helping others is a sure way to win people over. The knight says everything should be fine from here on out, but suddenly a voice crackles through his earpiece, reporting that a thief has just been caught breaking into one of the pharmacies. Guards are restraining the culprit, and the report warns of possible intruders at other shops. Dean listens as the order to move quickly comes through, confirming that the attackers have finally made their move. Assessing the situation, Evan explains that targeting people is a much bigger prize than just targeting property, predicting the attackers will aim to harm their allies directly. He asks Dine if he senses anything off, but before the knight can answer, his sword is already drawn in one swift motion. They both whip around to see a hooded figure emerge from the shadows, eyes locked on their target. Evan recognizes him instantly. It's the shadow thief Fanto, an early game villain famous for his stealth artifact, the Shadow Cape. Dean immediately shouts a warning. Without hesitation, Fanto declares that he's on a quest to eliminate anyone distributing potions in the slums. He claims he couldn't care less about noble titles and says that killing Evan would simply be a coincidence. The knight is furious, but our boy's mind is already racing. He recalls that Bishop Seteron only sends Fanto when he wants someone permanently erased. He had suspected they might pull a move like this and warned the pharmacy workers, but now he realizes the target was never the buildings, it was the people. With the assassin standing right in front of them, the real fight is about to begin. Evan admits he's surprised Seteron actually sent Fanto himself. The thief reacts with a jolt, shocked that Evan knows his name. As the ambush unfolds, Evan asks Dine if he can handle the fight on his own. Against a stealthy enemy, the knight admits it'll be tough, but he swears to protect Evan until reinforcements arrive. Our boy decides he's not about to let his knight die here, so he instructs DNE to close his eyes. Lunging forward, Evan throws something to the ground that erupts in a blinding flash of light, then shouts for the knight to act. Dean charges in his sword, cutting across the stunned thief's chest, and Fanto collapses. The knight seems hesitant to just let it go, but Evan waves it off, saying they wouldn't have gotten any information out of him anyway. Before anyone can react, a big-balled attacker rushes forward with a dagger. Shine yells out a warning, but Evan easily dodges, grabs the man's arm, and slams a punch into his gut. The knight tries to object, but Evan brushes it off, considering the ambush handled. His focus shifts to how the Marcus family will retaliate against those who cross them. Back at the mansion, the head butler reports that the captured goon isn't talking, only claiming Evan looked like a rich target for a robbery. There's no way to prove Bishop Seteron was involved. He was smart enough to cover his tracks. The Night Order is taking the fall, claiming they acted alone because they were upset about reduced temple donations. They insisted they had no clue the Sheridan heir would be present. The Marcus remarks that everyone is seriously underestimating his family. The butler notes the bishop must be out of his mind and suggests that a formal complaint to the order would make sure this never happens again. Evan's father shuts that idea down, arguing that if the order truly respected them, they never would have pulled a stunt like this. He decides it's time to show everyone the true power of the Sheridan family. The butler then adds that his son claims he's found the perfect weapon to use against the order. With 4 days to go, Evan tells his father that's all the time they need to prepare a decisive blow against the bishop. The market asks if this is connected to his contact within the order. Our young strategist confirms it is. He explains that if they're patient, his contact will deliver concrete evidence that will completely ruin the bishop. He adds that the bishop has been skimming donation money for himself funds that were meant for the order's main branch. Evan also reveals that Seteron ordered the knights to ambush Brothers Pharmacy. The plan is simple: approach the order with a deal, blame everything on the bishop, and let the Marquis family handle him. In return, they'll help cover up the scandal to protect the order's reputation. The Marquis immediately sees the opportunity to restore relations and gain support, while Evan points out the order will have no choice but to accept their terms. After a moment of thought, the Marquis pauses and asks if there's any possibility the informant is lying. Evan explains that she's skilled, holds a low-level position, and he's met with her personally, so he's confident she can be trusted. His father agrees to wait for the report, then turns to Mabel and Belua, acknowledging their service and entrusting his son's care to them. Our boy immediately starts protesting, yelling for Shine to rescue him. He continues to struggle, shouting to be let go as his father calmly walks away. 3 days later, Servina informs Evan that she's gathered all the evidence he needs. Seeing the mountain of proof, he remarks that this is more than enough to take out the bishop. She admits she'd been collecting it for a while, always planning to ruin him one day. Evan tells her that if they present this to the Order, they can completely erase him. She wonders aloud if he'll actually be killed because of her. She had only imagined his family name would be ruined. Evan reassures her that the moment the bishop targeted their pharmacy, he was already fated to die. Thanks to her, others won't have to suffer. These documents, he explains, will prevent a direct clash between the Sheridan family and the Order of the Great. He figures Cederon assumed the Marquis couldn't act without physical evidence. However, in Demon War 3, the Marquis crushes the Order, proving the bishop chose the wrong family to provoke. Evan tells Servina not to feel guilty and encourages her to put the matter behind her. She says she's just happy she could help, wishing him luck and promising to support him. He replies that he doesn't want her to work for the Marquis family directly. Instead, he asks her to remain within the Order. He explains that if his preferred candidate becomes Grand Bishop, his own survival chances increase, which benefits the Marquis family, the Dungeon City, and himself. At the hearing, Cederon screams that it's all slander and claims he's innocent, as guards restrain him. But the Marquis coldly orders him to be quiet, listing his crimes against Brothers Pharmacy, Evan, and the city. He announces the imprisonment of the Night Order members connected to the bishop and declares that Cederon will be excommunicated and hanged. At his command, the man is dragged away screaming that neither the Marquis nor the Order can do this to him. The Lord firmly declares that this is how they handle anyone who disrupts the city's order and threatens the Sheridan family. Outside, he addresses the gathered citizens, proclaiming that those in power must fulfill their duties and never bring harm to innocent lives. In the garden, Evan reflects that this should finally be enough to settle everything. Brothers Pharmacy will be much more secure now that the new bishop is already discussing ways to help with the Marquis. He notes that it's only right, then asks if there's anything else that needs to be taken care of. Shine mentions that one individual was appointed to a new position based on a good appraisal, despite having been the ex-bishop's personal secretary. Over at the cathedral, Servina Bellin introduces herself to the bishop, telling him she's excited to be working there. Meanwhile, people are raving about how Brothers Pharmacy is a massive success. Everyone knows it's a hit, but rumors are flying that Evan was the real brains behind the operation. Evan mutters that this isn't how it's supposed to be, knowing he could never take his brother's place. He never imagined that his desperate struggle to survive as a background character would lead to this. When Evan calls for her, Mabel tells him he's incredibly special. She adds that if he doesn't want to be the patriarch, then she doesn't want it for him either, since he doesn't have to become a Marquis just because he's special. Evan admits he'd originally planned to make his announcement when he turned 12 and received his first inspection order, but he decides to just say it now. He will not become a Marquis. Instead, he declares he's going to walk the path of a knight captain. Evan asks Mabel about the duties of an aristocrat. She lists governing the city and defending the dungeon, which he confirms are correct. She guesses what he's planning, and he confirms it. His thoughts drift to the Dungeon Knight Order, whose mission is to raid dungeons and form independent units. His mind flashes back to the original game's timeline where he failed, and his brother Eric had to take on the role instead. Filled with determination, he decides he'll be the one to raid dungeons to protect Eric. He remembers the trade manager's promise of 3 more demigods and starts counting his allies like Sheen Belelua and the others. Realizing he already has 7 powerful allies, Evan decides he'll talk to his father soon about becoming a dungeon knight. When he asks about them, Mabel says Shine is busy practicing his swordsmanship, while Bellewa has wandered off on her own. As they're walking, Mabel suggests he should go talk to Bellewa before she gets any funny ideas, but he just gives her a dry response. Mabel keeps pushing, even asking if she can join his knight order. He shuts that down quickly, though. Our boy reminds her she's already the face of Brothers Pharmacy. While they're walking, he notices people rushing down the hall and asks what all the commotion is about. A maid explains that the second lady just gave birth to a baby girl, and the news that he has a new sister starts to sink in. Inside the room, all the family's attention is focused on Miriam D. Sheaton and her newborn daughter. With all the talk about succession dying down, our boy realizes this actually works in his favor, since it delays him having to announce his dungeon night plans. During a quiet moment, Mabel relates his complicated feelings to her own simple wish of being his exclusive maid. Despite the happy news, Evan sits with her, feeling unsettled. He admits that something feels wrong because, in the game Demon War 3, there was never a daughter in the Sharan family. Since the family played a huge role in the game's story, her absence is suspicious. He figures that even a young daughter should have shown up at least once, which means in the original plot she never even existed. Maybe she married and left the family, but that's impossible since the game's story doesn't start for another 9 years. Running through the possibilities, he thinks either his actions have changed the timeline, or she was always meant to be born, but just never survived. The darker thought hits him in the original story she must have died. Mabel tells him not to worry, insisting he'll always be her number one, no matter how cute the new baby is. Evan sighs, muttering that's not what's bothering him at all. The baby girl smiles, and Evan insists she smiled right at him. Eric argues she was just admiring his broad shoulders while their mother holds the baby close, and Miriam thanks Reading for her help. Although Reading humbly gives the credit back to Miriam, Evan can't help but notice Miriam's position as the second wife. While the first wife already has sons, including the heir, he remembers that Miriam had never had a child until now. In the game, she was a malicious character who indirectly caused his death. Right now, though, there isn't a single trace of that hostility. The thought strikes him that her descent into villainy must have been tied to events that happen in the future. Maybe he can prevent it. If he changes her path, maybe he can alter the fate where she turns evil and he dies. He thinks of the Marquis's second wife, Miriam D. Sheridan. He wonders if she was truly a villain from the start, or if some incident pushed her into darkness. He has a sinking feeling he already knows what that incident might be. Sitting across from him, Bernard lays out a grim possibility. He explains that even inside a nobleman's mansion protected by knights and priests, it's still possible for an infant to die. Bernard concludes that a tragedy like that would most likely be caused by either a curse or a disease. Evan repeats the words quietly to himself, then suddenly slams his hands on the table, insisting that something might happen to Elizabeth. The old man calmly replies that he already knows. He suggests that since the Marquis's household is so heavily guarded, they should be looking for threats outside the mansion, not within. As he speaks, Bernard hints that he has an idea, explaining that if his hunch is correct, they might be able to save not only Elizabeth, but a lot of other people too. He proposes that their first step must be to search the city for any traces of a monster. Bernard recalls a massive reverse flow from a dungeon they barely managed to stop this year, which makes this whole situation feel even sketchier. Right on cue, our boy spots something strange on the ground. He calls the others over, pointing to a dark stain he identifies as orc droppings. Bernard isn't surprised, saying he expected to find a clue like this. Din, however, is skeptical and asks if it's really orc waste, wondering if it just got mixed in with the building materials during reconstruction. Bernard notes that the color is a perfect match and figures it was probably overlooked in the rush to finish on time. When pressed, the knight just asks why it even matters. He argues that if materials from dungeons were really that dangerous, the city would have fallen ages ago, since weapons and artifacts are made from monster parts too. Bernard firmly disagrees, explaining that those items are processed differently. He clarifies that the real danger comes from raw materials like blood or waste from a monster's body, which can easily spread diseases. He then brings up dungeon sickness, a condition that weakens the entire body from being exposed to a monster's habitat for too long. People with low mana training, or those who venture too deep into the dungeon's lower levels, often catch it. Bernard pushes the point, asking if they'd believe him if he said this sickness could actually break out outside of a dungeon. He explains that when enough materials from a specific dungeon region are gathered in one spot, they can recreate an environment similar to the dungeon itself, especially in a city that just dealt with a reverse flow. The concentration might be lower, he says, but the sickness can still spread outside even if it dies out more quickly. He cautiously explains that unless the person is a very weak child, dungeon sickness usually has very little effect. Dean repeats, in shock, a little kid. Bernard clarifies that the sickness itself isn't fatal, but there's also no cure for it. He adds, the real danger is when someone who's already infected catches another illness. That's when it can become deadly. He warns that because the reverse flow happened so recently, the chances of an outbreak are dangerously high. Their mission now is to track down the source of the disease before it spreads using only these faint clues. Our hero acts decisively, ordering them to report this to the Marquis immediately. He wants all newborns shielded from outside contact as he rushes off to handle things. Just then, Shervina bursts into the room, desperately calling for Evan. When Bernard asks who she is, our protagonist explains that she's a trusted priestess from the Order of the Great. She gasps that they have a huge problem. The number of sick people has skyrocketed, and the priests can't handle the crisis on their own. Dean mutters that if this turns out to be infectious, the situation could be a total disaster. Evan immediately demands that she show him the sick. She agrees and quickly leads them into a room filled with patients lying on beds. Bernard inspects the patients closely and announces that while the disease has mutated slightly, he can still create a medicine for it right away. He tells Evan to summon every last pharmacist from Brothers Pharmacy. Our boy declares they have to stop this illness in its early stages, telling the gathered pharmacists that he needs all their help. In unison, the pharmacists call it a disaster that not even God's power can stop. But Bernard calmly replies that he already knows the treatment. He admits its properties have shifted a bit, but he's already analyzed that part of the mutation. Evan rallies the team, reminding them that just as his grandpa said, they only need to focus on creating the cure. The pharmacists respond with a roar of determined cheers. Brothers Pharmacy and the Temple throw themselves into the work. With the Marquise's full support, the sick are quarantined, and all contaminated areas are swiftly cleansed. Once things calm down, Evan thanks Bernard. Bernard explains that they only minimized the damage because of the miraculous cooperation between the authorities, the pharmacists, and the temple. He cautions Evan that no matter how fast they move, some losses are always inevitable at the beginning of an outbreak. He adds that they should focus on the countless lives they saved instead. Our boy gives a steady yes in response, but a loud voice suddenly calls out from outside. Mabel rushes in panicked, crying that Lady Liz's condition has taken a turn for the worse. He hurries after her to find Liz's mother clutching the baby, who is now breathing weakly in her arms. Evan's mind races as he wonders what went wrong, questioning if the medicine somehow failed. Then a chilling realization strikes him. Could it be that the cure didn't work at all? Evan holds baby Liz in his arms as her desperate mother asks him what they should do. The mother is convinced she won't make it, but our protagonist refuses to give up. He turns to Bernard, desperately asking if there's another way. The old man replies, "There is a medicine that can permanently boost a person's core strength, but we lack the ingredients. It's a medicine so rare that even Bernard, who cleared Demon War 0 through 4, barely knows about it." Our boy realizes Liz is only level 1. He suddenly remembers that experience points always go to whoever lands the final blow. Convinced this will work, he summons a slime. His plan is to weaken it until it's near death, then use Liz's tiny gloved hand to deliver the finishing blow. Holding the slime, he encourages Liz, telling her all she has to do is land the final blow. Gripping the slime, he guides Liz's tiny gloved hand to strike. While the maid and others gasp, he urges her to push just a little harder, holding the monster steady as everyone cheers her on. Finally, the slime drops to the floor and the woman on the bed clutches the baby tightly to her chest. He whispers what a relief it is, and she murmurs in agreement. Evan's mother and father are overcome with shock and joy. Realizing Liz has survived, the Marquis shouts for a priest and a healer, and someone exclaims that Evan saved her before rushing to pull him into a hug. Bernard rests a hand on his head, praising him for a job well done. He calls the method unconventional, but effective, admitting it's something only Evan could have managed. Just then, Mabel rushes in, hugging him fiercely and crying with relief. His thoughts turn to Velen, an infection he recalls once devastated an entire country. He remembers it from the game and wonders how the Marquis managed to stop it back then and how many lives were lost in the process. His thoughts drift to how much worse the outcome could have been without his grandfather's and brother's pharmacy. Seeing his expression, Bernard tells him not to brood. Calmly mixing some liquids, Bernard urges him to use his knowledge to help others. He adds, "If that's still not enough, then it's okay to give up. After all, if no one is willing to step forward, the world isn't worth saving." Later at the mansion, Evan is holding the baby when Eric reaches out for her, calling her name. Evan teases that she likes him more, so Eric decides to just hug them both, pulling them into a group hug. Evan shoves his brother away, still carefully holding Liz. Their father watches the exchange before calling Evan closer, telling him that by saving her, he also saved the city and the country. When his father asks if this is because of his brother, Evan meets his gaze and declares that he's going to become a dungeon knight captain. Meanwhile, during training, Eric D. Sheaton, Evan's older brother, has been working just as diligently. Our protagonist knows the Marquis must already be aware of his intentions, so he decides it's time to make it official. He tells his father he wants to become a dungeon knight captain. The Marquis isn't surprised, correctly suspecting it has something to do with Eric. He agrees, promising his full support for both his son and the Night Order, but on one condition: Evan can only take on the role after he becomes an adult. Evan reluctantly agrees, and his father advises him to start preparing now, both the facilities and the people he'll eventually lead. He thanks the Marquis. His father warns that if the preparations aren't ready by the time he turns 18, the permission will be revoked. Evan accepts the terms, and the Marquis adds that this gives him 7 years to plan. Evan smiles, saying he's already chosen a name for them. Meanwhile, at the pharmacy, employees are celebrating a job well done, deciding it's time to trade the smell of herbs for alcohol. As they all head out, a few workers stay behind since they're the only ones who can make the necessary medicine. Evan approaches Bernard, voicing his concern that ending one pandemic might make people let their guard down. He insists they need to be ready to respond even faster next time. The old man replies that their continued work will take care of that. He explains that the outbreak has made the brothers' pharmacy famous, which will force the king to recognize its value over that of the religious order. Our protagonist mulls this over as Bernard predicts the king will likely summon the Marquis very soon. He realizes the king's request will probably be to expand the brothers' pharmacy across the entire nation. Bernard figures the easiest move would be to open a branch in the capital, though he notes the king might prefer relocating the original pharmacy, something the Marquis would surely refuse. Sure enough, the Marquis soon tells his son they're heading to the capital because the king has summoned him. Evan protests, citing his lack of etiquette and suggesting Eric go instead, but his father insists. Though he'd planned to visit the capital later, our boy sees this as a golden opportunity to collect hidden treasures and knowledge from Demon War 3 and 4, or maybe even from Demon War 2 and 1. Traveling in the carriage, he sits with Shine Balawa and the Marquis. After 2 weeks, they arrive at an estate. Evan recalls that Count Byron's family is destined to be ruined before Demon War 3 begins, and concludes that nothing good can come from getting involved with them. A man asks if such words might negatively influence the Marquis's judgment. The Marquis answers that it's fine, as a father should trust his son. Besides, even if he's wrong, their family won't be ruined. Just then, a servant rushes in, announcing that people from the palace have arrived with an urgent summons from His Majesty, leaving the father and son startled. At the palace, aristocrats are typically summoned for an audience immediately. When Evan and the Marquis greet the Emperor, he waves off the formality, saying there's no need for such manners between them. He adds that he's glad to see the Marquis is the same as ever. The nobleman replies that the same could be said for him. The Emperor then asks if the child with him is the famous Jewel of the Sheetons. In response, Evan stands and states his full name, saying it is a great honor and a privilege to meet this land's respectable ruler. The Emperor notes that Evan takes after his father, calling it the highest praise he can offer. The Marquis replies that it is a great honor. Their host hums and cuts to the chase, wanting to reward the boy's accomplishments with his brother's pharmacy. He praises the kid for doing a great job and suggests setting up a branch in the capital, which gets the Marquis talking. In addition to more locations, the Emperor promises to shield them from the Order of the Great and any other opposition. When he gets down to it, the main sticking point is the distribution rights for their unique medicinal herbs. He wants to use this to get rid of opposition, set up shop in the capital, and keep them under his thumb. The Marquis argues that his son's success in stopping the plague proves the city would benefit from a pharmacy just like theirs. With neither side willing to give an inch, our protagonist decides he has to step up and support his father. The Emperor then turns to him, admitting he was a bit too eager to meet in person. Unexpectedly, he tells our boy to go rest in the palace garden, leaving both him and the Marquis completely shocked. Evan thanks him, but starts to object, only to be cut off by the Emperor. The Emperor calls for a guard and orders the second son of the Sheridan family to be escorted to the garden. As guards approach, Evan thinks he's just lost his one chance to back his father up. One of the men shows him the way to the garden, and Evan plans to continue his slime training, asking to look around alone, which the guard allows. In the garden, he walks around as a faint blue glow seeps from his hand, feeling an immense amount of mana in the air. His alchemy training has also boosted his physical abilities, but he has zero combat skills to use that energy for anything other than making potions. With the mana shortage solved, he can now focus on reducing the size of his summoned slimes. In his head, he pictures a large slime shrinking down, since smaller slimes would let him summon 4 or 5 at once to kill. Doubling his training speed would be awesome, since slime training is key to the nation's power. Suddenly a voice asks what he's doing. Evan jumps, startled, and demands to know who's there. His eyes lock onto a pink-haired girl standing before him, silently holding a worm. Stepping closer, she asks if he wants to touch it, and he just yells, "No." She circles him curiously, studying him, then leans in and remarks that he's as pretty as the worm. He replies that that's a new one. She insists worms are pretty, to which he just calls her a weird kid. Then it hits him. He remembers the pink-haired characters in Demon War and hesitantly asks if she is Serena. She confirms it, introducing herself as Serena L. Silkline, the Emperor's youngest daughter, and the trigger for a major questline in Demon War. He remembers the Emperor suggesting he visit the garden, and Serena then says she's 10 before asking how old he is. Our boy replies that he's Evan D. Sheridan, 11, and the youngest of his family. She notes that he's older, then says his name while staring at him with incredibly intense eyes. She asks about the little friends in his hand and why he's killing them. In the garden, Serena stares at Evan. She tells him the little friends in his hand are asking him to save them, then demands to know why he's tormenting them. When our boy asks what she means by saving them, she replies that she can't hear them anymore and guesses they're all dead. Our hero recalls that in Demon War 4, when the princess was kidnapped by demons, she was brainwashed and ended up controlling powerful monsters. He wonders if this is Serena's real innate ability. Since she's lived her whole life sheltered in the palace, she would have never known she could tame monsters. Lying won't work, since she already saw him summon them. Evan tells her it's for his own survival. He gets stronger by killing them, and if he's stronger, he can endure. He then summons a slime and kills it to demonstrate. Serena simply replies, "But you can't die." When he asks why Serena requests that he spare just one, after he confirms which one she means, he feels the Mirasol necklace glow in his hand. She explains it won't attack if he releases it, so Evan quickly suggests they move to the fountain just to be safe. She agrees, and they walk over together. By the fountain, our protagonist channels mana into the necklace and summons a small glowing fire slime. Serena is amazed by the new type. He offers it to her, admitting he can't control it himself. She eagerly accepts it and gushes about how cute it is. He warns her it could be dangerous, but she just brushes off his concern, asking if it's truly harmless as the slime squirms in her hand. As they talk, Evan mentions that training would be impossible if all slimes were like this. Serena explains that most of them can't think. They only act on instinct to attack whatever they see, which makes them safe to kill. Surprised, he asks who told her that, and she calmly replies that Ruby did, having already named the slime. She adds that she can read its thoughts, revealing their bond is an actual contract. Evan explains that she can raise it by spending time with it, which will make it protect her. She wonders if she could do the same with a worm, but he tells her it only works with monsters. Accepting this, she holds Ruby close. Back in the garden, he offers to explain her ability, but she just asks again if it would let her form a contract with a worm, leaving his uncertain answer hanging in the air. Later at the dinner table, the market brings up the king's wish to arrange an engagement between Evan and the princess. Evan immediately shoots it down while everyone else is stunned by the sudden proposal. His father reassures him that he's already turned down the offer, but warns that the king isn't likely to give up so easily. Evan finds it odd, wondering why the king is so insistent when there are plenty of other noble families. The Marquis reveals it's not about titles or business. The king personally wants the boy who founded Brothers Pharmacy and stopped the plague. This makes Evan all the more unwilling, as he's worried it'll expose him as just some unremarkable extra. He begs his father to tell the king he's unworthy of the princess. His dad just urges him to be honest about his feelings, causing Evan to hesitate as he remembers Serena and Ruby. When pressed, she picks up the slime and orders him to speak casually when they're alone, adding that she likes him as much as she likes worms. Evan tells her she's just as pretty as everyone says, and will be beautiful when she's older, though not quite as pretty as Bellowa. He admits he can't get a read on her personality, and finds dealing with her exhausting, preferring to stay out of it entirely. When his father asks if he truly doesn't want the engagement, he flat out replies that he never wants to see her again. The Marquis is relieved, admitting he was worried Evan might actually like her, since the king kept insisting they'd make a cute couple. Evan figures His Majesty was basically holding him hostage to force him to spend more time with the princess. The Marquis explains that there's a 4-day meeting about Brothers Pharmacy starting tomorrow. He adds that His Majesty requested Evan's presence, but quickly says it's fine if he doesn't go, offering to handle it so Evan can tour the capital instead. Just then, Serena bursts in, calling his name and asking him to come play with her. Evan freezes on the spot, turning to see her, before glancing at his father, who admits his little plan didn't work. Out on the street, Evan asks what someone so important is doing out and about. Serena just replies that it's okay because she has 2 very powerful guards with her. He explains that he already has plans today and can't hang out but she quickly counters that she'll just tag along with his plans instead. Our protagonist insists there are definitely no worms, then pauses. Before telling the princess, he'll leave it to her imagination. Turning to Shine and Balawa, he tells them to get ready. Evan also suggests they buy some new clothes since they'll need to get around without their uniforms for the next 3 days. Shine asks if that includes him, and Evan confirms. Balawa nods, promising they'll get ready and be right back. He explains that they're his precious friends who became his servants due to some tricky circumstances. He asks the princess to treat them well, and she agrees without a second thought. When he presses her for an answer, Evan asks why she's really here. Serena says she just told the king she wanted to play with Brother Evan, and he gave her permission. Our boy quickly asks if she mentioned anything about yesterday, and she confirms, explaining that she met him in the garden and then ran into Ruby. He starts to panic when she casually adds that she told her father she likes him as much as worms, and that her dad totally understood. Evan's mind immediately jumps to an engagement, and he frustratedly mutters that he wanted her to be more free, not tied down. She insists she only told her father she wanted to play with him. After a long sigh, our protagonist agrees to hang out, but only if she promises to keep it a secret. Serena beams and happily agrees. Later, they arrive at a shop called King Island Cigari, where the shopkeeper warmly greets Princess Serena before noticing Evan D. Sharon and confirming who he is. He waves off the formality and asks for the finest outfits she has for Shine and Belawa, made from the very best fabrics. After checking them out, he sees that the clothes can expand. The shopkeeper explains they're made with enchanted materials that adjust as the wearer grows. Serena tilts her head, asking why not just buy new clothes when you get bigger. Our boy explains that this way he can hold on to outfits that are tied to special memories. She asks if wearing them really helps make memories, and when he nods, she shyly makes a suggestion. Curious, he raises an eyebrow, and she explains that she'll buy him an outfit so he can buy one for her in return. That way they can both have outfits that hold special memories. He agrees. At the fitting room, Shine steps out from behind the curtain in his new clothes. Evan follows right after, now dressed in a sharp white suit with gold details. The princess soon appears in a frilly pink dress, twirling as she asks how she looks. He simply replies, "It's pretty." He quietly asks if she plans on wearing it for the rest of the day. When she says yes and asks why, he just brushes it off as nothing. Balawa bows, gratefully thanking him for the beautiful outfit, while Serena gushes over how lovely she looks, exclaiming she's even prettier than a worm. The shopkeeper thanks Evan for stopping by, saying she really enjoyed helping them pick out their clothes. Our boy thanks her in return, before asking to buy one more item, the one with the red twisty design. He asks for it to be wrapped up carefully. Although the shopkeeper explains it's just another size-adjusting garment, he insists on having it wrapped tightly so no one can see what's inside. Turns out it's a cursed garment that summons the Kraken. Our protagonist reflects on his main goal for the day, securing the magical dress, which is part of an in-game treasure hunt to prevent his future death. While browsing, Evan sifts through the jewelry, remarking that the shops in the capital are on a whole other level compared to back home. Shine calls him vain, and our boy retorts just loud enough for him to overhear. Shine then asks how he can afford everything, guessing the pharmacy must be booming, while Belua adds that the Marquis gives him an allowance too. Our protagonist admits there are still more places he'd like to see, but suggests they grab a bite to eat first. As they arrive, the group heads toward a large building, and Shine squints, wondering if it's a cafe and not a mansion. The young master explains that it's a renovated estate, and Shine nods while saying the place is nice, but insisting it had better be the best cafe in the capital, especially since the princess is with them. Evan simply replies that what Shine's looking for is inside. Upon entering, the owner greets Serena warmly. Guests whisper among themselves, wondering if the group consists of foreign aristocrats. A few even recognize Evan as the Jewel of Shiran. The owner offers them any seat they'd like, but Evan specifically requests the room in the far right corner of the second floor. The manager hesitates, explaining that customers tend to avoid that room, so it's usually empty. Our boy insists, flipping a gold coin into the man's hand. The manager immediately rushes off to have the room cleaned and set with their finest cutlery and plates. Once the food arrives, Evan starts with the soup, then moves on to the salad and bread. He follows that with the fish course, saving the steak for last, before finally cutting into it. He then instructs the others to have a slice of cake and some Earl Grey tea. Noticing Shine's discomfort, he asks if he's not enjoying the food. Shine shakes his head, explaining it's not the food, but a strange chill in the room. A realization hits him, and he wonders if they're not alone. Belua assures him not to worry, saying the presence won't reveal itself until they've finished their meal. Sure enough, once the table is cleared, the spirit of a young girl appears, and Evan, Shine, and Belua watch as she slowly fades away. He comments on the event being a success, before catching himself using game terminology, earning a curious look from Serena. Turning to the others, he points out the ghost they just saw and explains that they've helped her spirit pass on. He knew all along that the specific meal was part of a hidden quest requirement. Eating all the dishes the spirit once loved fulfills the condition, granting the entire party a rare permanent boost to their existence level and skill growth. Serena asks if the ghost left anything behind, and he explains that she only left them a harmless blessing. While Belua notes her own renewed energy, a still pale Shine asks about the spirit's fate. Our protagonist confirms that she has peacefully moved on. Only then does Shine mutter, "Is it okay if I pass out now?" before toppling forward. Later, back in their room, Belua shuts the door and reports that she's made sure no one will disturb them. Evan praises her, then turns his attention to the table where an array of gems, crystals, and jewelry is spread out. With Belua and Serena beside him, our boy asks if they should start calculating today's haul. As he counts, Evan finds 32 treasures. In total, surprised to realize he'd uncovered artifacts from the First Demon War. Serena looks over the collection as Belua voices her concern about just leaving the artifacts out like this. Our protagonist reassures her, explaining that artifacts have their own inherent durability. The princess asks why items like these would be sold in a regular jewelry shop. He picks up a glowing ring, explaining that most people are completely unaware of their true nature. He explains that not all magical items look like artifacts at first glance, and some only become true artifacts over time. Their magic awakens gradually, while others hold hidden potential that will never be unlocked if they aren't handled correctly. He adds, some only reveal their power after finding a compatible owner or being infused with mana. Serena recalls that the palace has a dedicated mage responsible for managing its artifacts. He points out that an ordinary person could stare at an artifact all day and not recognize it. Trying to do that in a jewelry shop, however, would just get them kicked out. Belua realizes the jeweler must have taken a huge loss, and Evan agrees, adding that it's only because the man didn't recognize their true value. When Serena tries to ask another question, he playfully dismisses it as a trade secret. When she presses, Serena asks if she can have one. Evan gently chides her about asking for handouts, but she counters by offering to get him something from the royal palace in return. Recognizing the immense value of her offer, he quickly agrees, promising to hold up his end and calling it a deal. She insists, however, that it's not a deal but a fair exchange of gifts. When he tells her to pick one out, she asks him to choose for her. He selects a necklace, introducing it as Tigress's Glory. Evan explains it's the perfect item for a tamer as it boosts their success rate and allows them to create a protective barrier by infusing it with mana. The princess declares it's perfect for her, but the moment she puts it on the necklace begins to glow. Our boy notices this strange reaction and wonders if its properties have changed from what he remembered. Serena announces that her skill as a monster tamer has leveled up and declares the necklace is a perfect fit. Evan agrees, and in return she agrees to hear him out. He tells her to make sure that if the item he wants is in the palace treasury, she has to bring it to him, to which she agrees. With a smile, she promises she'll bring him the item. She even jokes about snagging her father's ceremonial sword, which he immediately shoots down. Later, as she gets ready to leave, Serena confirms that she just needs to bring him the item he mentioned. Evan figures the artifact he wants isn't valuable to most people, so the king should hand it over easily if she asks. Turning to Belua, he suggests picking something out for her too, but she says she wasn't expecting anything and points out his earlier words about making a deal with the princess. He replies that this isn't a deal, but simply a present he's giving her. As she looks at him, he pulls out a pair of earrings. He tells her they're called the Volcanic Spirit Earrings, explaining that they boost mana recovery and amplify all fire attribute magic. Belua asks if they're really what she thinks they are, and he confirms it, adding that they're usually paired with the Snow Mountain Spirit Earrings. She says she can't accept them, questioning how she could possibly have the same kind of treasure as her young master. When he asks if she's rejecting his gift, she replies that she isn't worthy of it. Our boy insists she can't turn him down. He firmly places the red earrings in her palm, urging her to complain sometimes, instead of keeping everything bottled up. Belua warns that if she let out all her emotions toward him, it might cause some serious trouble. The protagonist tells her to speak her mind if something is bothering her, claiming he can handle any problem that comes up. She agrees and puts on the earrings, thanking him, then asks him to call her Lua from now on. On day 2, Evan declares it's time for a treasure hunt for items that will protect him, and decides to leave the fancy aristocratic streets to explore hidden shops scattered across the capital. Speaking to Shine, he remarks that they're going to be busy and hopes the princess takes off soon. Our boy then pauses, looking at Shine suspiciously since his expression is totally unreadable. Noticing his state, our boy asks Shine what's wrong. He reminds him that he passed out once yesterday but seemed perfectly fine after they got back to the mansion. The protagonist jokes that he looks like someone who just got dumped. Shine mutters that his body feels heavy. Evan wonders if he didn't get the buff, explaining that his own body felt better right away. Shine replies that he thinks he got the blessing, but he still feels chilly. He adds that his body and arms still feel weighed down. The young master suddenly has a light bulb moment. Without a second thought, he hands over a pair of silver bracelets and tells Shine to take them for now. Shine asks if they're just ordinary bracelets, and Evan explains they're called ghost bracelets, increasing movement and attack speed by 15%. He admits he wanted to get him better gear, but says, "These will be fine all the way up to the 60th floor of the dungeon." Shocked Shine repeats, "The 60th floor," while the protagonist explains that the current best for a full dungeon team is only the 45th floor. Evan warns him not to rely on the bracelets too much, since eventually, Shine will need artifacts for both full defense and attack speed. Evan asks how he feels now, and his companion runs a few steps before admitting his body is faster but still feels heavy. In that instant, a dark shadow suddenly materializes behind him. Evan stares in shock, demanding to know what Shine just did, but Shine brushes it off and insists it was nothing. The ghostly maid drifts closer and both of them scream in horror, believing she had already passed on. She casually explains that she thought so too and went to sleep only to wake up right next to him instead. Shine yells at her to get away, accusing her of being the reason his body feels so heavy, but she admits she already tried to leave and it didn't work. Wondering why that could be, she teasingly asks if he's possessed, making him shout in panic. Our boy reminds her that she mentioned something about looking comfy earlier. With a grin, the ghost says that the bracelet looks comfy, adding that it feels nice just looking at it. She asks if she can go inside, claiming it'll fix Shine's chills and the heavy feeling. He yells for her to get in immediately, and she happily thanks him, ignoring Evan's protests as she dives right into the bracelet. The protagonist realizes this is an event he's never seen before, one that never happened in Demon War, when the bracelet first appeared. From inside, she comments on how cozy it feels. Thinking about the name Ghost Bracelet, he realizes it might have been designed to house a ghost from the very beginning. He speculates that this event simply never happened in the game, meaning they just stumbled upon a brand new feature. He wonders if, because of her, the bracelet just became a growth-type item. Shine complains that it looks exactly the same as when he first put it on, but Evan insists that's a good thing. Shine isn't convinced, pointing out the ghost is still hanging around, though she just says she enjoys it in there. A knock on the door interrupts them, and it's Balawa and Serena letting the protagonist know they're ready to head out. He keeps their destination for the day a secret, telling Shine he'll just have to wait and see. Serena steps forward and hands him a box, saying it's the gift she promised before they leave. Inside is a short sword, and his eyes widen when he realizes it's the Limit Breaker. He remembers it's a super rare item from Demon War 2 that normally requires making massive contributions to the royal family just to obtain. Serena curiously asks what it is, and he explains that it's an item that well breaks limits. Though he doesn't explain any further, he thinks to himself that this is his ticket to surpassing the capacity limit for artifact equipment. For someone like him who could still die even with multiple defensive artifacts, having a sixth one is an absolute must. Lifting the dagger, he activates it with the word limitless. Energy surges as a golden lock materializes over an empty artifact slot. Chains shatter and the slot unlocks completely. Shine asks what in the world just happened, while Serena observes and wonders if that's how it's meant to be used. Evan replies that it's hard to explain, but basically it increases his artifact capacity. She gets it guessing he's going to look for more artifacts now, which he confirms. As they walk, however, Evan seems completely exhausted. Serena asks why he hasn't bought much, even after 4 hours of visiting different places. Our boy wonders if the artifact he gave her has some kind of stamina-boosting feature. She then asks where they're going next, but he suggests they eat first, mentioning a nearby place he knows well. Shine curiously asks about it, but the young master just tells him not to worry about it. When they arrive, the group finds themselves in front of a large building. Dean asks how he knows about this place. The protagonist simply explains that he's heard it's popular. Amy's Kicking is a key location in Demon War 2, a place where you can find party members and where major events happen, even attracting the Silent Night Guild. Shine voices his concern about alcohol being served, but Evan brushes it off, pointing out that they have guards with them and it's the middle of the day. Dean says it's fine as our boy's focus shifts to his other reason for coming here. It's a gathering spot for the kingdom's top mercenaries, and the captain warns the other guards to stay on high alert in a place full of rough types. They enter the tavern, and Evan asks for a large table and 7 servings of the kicking special. Shine observes the place, remarking that some really strong people are gathered here. Our boy confirms it, saying, "This is where the country's strongest warriors gather." At their table, Bilawa questions why they've come somewhere so dangerous. Evan admits he's here to find a treasure. Inwardly, though, he notes it's more of a human treasure he's after. Reassuring her that the guards have them covered, he casually calls her by her nickname, which makes Shine jolt in surprise. Serena repeats the name and asks if she can use it too, but Lua politely declines, which makes the princess pout while Shine and the protagonist watch from the sidelines. Their food arrives, plates of the kicking special, and he invites everyone, guards included, to start eating. The guards thank him. Shine digs right in, and Lua takes a cautious first bite. Our boy scans the room, searching for any familiar faces from the Demon War series. Mid-meal, someone catches his attention. His gaze locks on a figure at the bar, whose blonde hair and robe-like mantle at first make him look like a priest. A second look, however, reveals the outline of steel armor underneath. Evan immediately recognizes him as Ryan Dukas, the Unbreakable Shield, a notorious character in Demon War, famed for his near-impenetrable defense and relentless healing. Across the room, Ryan sits at the bar, and Dean's attention also drifts to the same man. He confirms that he recognizes him as someone whose name carries a lot of weight among mercenaries. The captain recounts Ryan's past, explaining that, as a child praised for his divine power, he chose the path of a holy knight over that of a priest. He adds that lacking the right build for combat, Ryan failed, leaving him with only 2 options. He could either abandon the knight's path or spend a full decade training before trying again. After failing, he turned to alcohol as a crutch. Our boy files that information away. When Serena urges him forward, he walks up to the bar, his steps drawing Ryan's attention. The knight turns and stares at him, and the protagonist greets Ryan and asks if he can join him. Evan takes the seat beside Ryan, whose eyes widen upon hearing his name. He stands up and questions why someone of such high status would sit with him. Our boy wonders why a man who's supposed to be aiming for the title of Holy Knight Captain is drinking his day away in a place like this. Ryan slams his drink down and recalls the vow he made upon receiving his blessing to become a holy knight, fight in the war, and earn even greater favor from God. In a moment of confession, Ryan explains he's the student of a fallen aristocrat from another country. He reveals that he was born with high mana, but no aptitude for magic, so he was pushed toward the priesthood instead. After receiving a blessing for protecting someone, he set his sights on becoming a holy knight. The only problem was, despite countless hours of training, no weapon ever felt right for him. He confesses that he's not just bad with weapons, he's absolutely terrible at fighting, a fact that earned him nothing but disapproval from all his instructors. Even though everyone told him to quit, he flat out refused. He was convinced the power God gave him was for protecting people on the front lines, not for hanging back and casting healing spells. Intrigued, our protagonist suddenly asks him what this special power is called. Ryan explains, "It's the Guardian's blessing, a gift granted only to those who are willing to sacrifice themselves for others." He goes on to say that his blessing essentially acts as a taunt, forcing enemies to target him instead of his allies. And while the blessing is always active, he mentions it gets a major boost in power whenever he uses the Holy Knight's divine shout skill. Evan recognizes that it's the perfect ability for a protector. Ryan agrees, but then sighs, lamenting that he was never given the actual strength to fight back, wondering aloud how he ended up so pathetic. Our protagonist pushes him for details, asking how he managed to save people when he first got the blessing. He reminds Ryan that it's a power for protection, not for fighting. Ryan confesses that he just used his power to draw the monster's attention and then ran like crazy until he'd led them far away from everyone else. Ryan thinks his method was pitiful, but Evan completely disagrees, telling him it was actually awesome. He argues that it's one thing for a skilled warrior to fight, but it takes true courage for someone who can't fight at all to step up and put themselves in danger. Although he's still doubtful, Ryan listens as our protagonist calls him a true hero, pointing out that he protected people, even knowing his blessing wasn't meant for combat. Visibly moved, Ryan admits that no one has ever said anything like that to him before. Our protagonist is hoping for a big declaration that Ryan now believes he can be a great holy knight. When he asks if Ryan feels better, Ryan admits that he does, at least a little. Evan encourages him, saying he absolutely can become a great holy knight and that he truly believes in him. But in response, Ryan just shakes his head and says that it doesn't matter anymore, leaving Evan completely shocked. Ryan clarifies that after talking with Evan, he's made up his mind he doesn't care what other people think anymore. From this point on, he's going to do what he truly wants and vows to protect others no matter what anyone else says. Our protagonist reflects that this outcome is even better than what he'd hoped for. Filled with new resolve, Evan steps forward and properly introduces himself as Evan D. Sharan II, son of Marquis D. Sharan, the ruler of Dungeon City. In turn, Ryan introduces himself as Ryan Dukas, a descendant of the legendary Dukas family that once stopped a dragon's breath. He sincerely thanks Evan for listening, admitting that their conversation gave him the courage he needed to move forward. Evan thinks to himself that God must have had a very good reason for granting Ryan such a unique blessing. Finally, our protagonist explains that he won't be inheriting the Marquis title. Instead, when he comes of age, he plans to create his very own Knight Order. Extending a hand, Evan officially offers to recruit Ryan into his future Knight Order. He tells Ryan that he has the power to protect people, and more importantly, he has the will to do so. He asks Ryan to join him in protecting their city. Humbled, Ryan replies that it's an undeserved honor and such a noble position. He adds that if Evan is still offering the position fully aware of his shortcomings, then he will gratefully accept and give it his absolute best. The two shake on it, and our protagonist officially welcomes him as the first member of his Knight Order. Suddenly, treasure chests burst open, spilling gold jewels and priceless artifacts all over the room. The Marquis demands to know what's going on. Evan casually explains he just stumbled upon it all by pure luck on his way back, and he plans to use the treasure to fund his new Knight Order. He then introduces Ryan to his father, explaining that he scouted him in the capital. Ryan formally states his full name and declares his intention to serve as a dungeon knight under Evan's command. Following the introduction, he asks the Marquis to use some of the artifacts to help free his friend from the Order of the Great. The Marquis just laughs, revealing that he had already prepared the necessary funds for Ryan. And with that, all their business in the capital is concluded. The narrator notes that Evan obtained various artifacts, increased his equipment capacity, and successfully recruited Ryan Dukas into his Knight Order. Outside, the princess wistfully says she wishes Evan could stay and live with her at the palace, adding that her father would let her go outside any time as long as she was with him. Evan replies that he has to return to the Dungeon City and probably won't be coming back to the capital. She sadly remarks that it sounds like they'll never see each other again. He confirms her fears, explaining the Marquis rejected the engagement proposal, but she stubbornly insists that they will meet again. Evan warns her not to say things like that, reminding the princess that someone as important as her shouldn't just be wandering around freely. He tells her that the world is a dangerous place, and she needs to become strong enough to survive and protect herself. Taking his words to heart, she's filled with motivation and declares that she'll become strong enough to visit him on her own and maybe even join his Knight Order. Our protagonist lets out a sigh before telling her she can do as she pleases, but only if she can actually become strong enough to handle it. She promises she will. Before they part ways, she asks that the next time they meet, he call her by her nickname, Rai. The scene shifts to the carriages traveling away from the capital. On the road, Ryan remarks that he foresees danger in their master's future. Shine agrees, clarifying that it won't be just one danger, but multiple threats waiting for them. Ryan compares his ability to perceive the world's secrets to a rare gift, musing that these constant threats must be the price he pays for such power. Shine just sighs and agrees, adding that protecting their master's life is the top priority. After all, there'd be no Knight Order without him. Ryan vows he'd raise his sword anytime to protect Evan, but Evan just points out that he's terrible with a sword. Ryan sheepishly admits his courage made him forget his complete lack of skill. Evan clarifies that he only meant Ryan is bad at combat, not that he's useless. He confidently reminds Ryan that his real talent is protection and that he was blessed with it for a reason. Ryan fires back, asking how he's supposed to protect anyone if he can't even fight. The answer is simple. He doesn't need a sword to protect someone, just the right weapon for his talent. It dawns on Ryan, who asks if he means a shield. Evan confirms it, explaining that the day Ryan stood up to that monster, he'd already discovered his own unique fighting style. Our protagonist explains that Ryan draws the enemy's attention to himself, locking them down while keeping everyone else safe. He then asks, what more could you possibly need? Evan calls him out for ignoring what happened, and Ryan admits he was just embarrassed, though he concedes the idea has merit. Evan notes that with a team, it would work perfectly, saying Ryan's talent is ideal for coordinated battles. Ryan just calls his own past stubbornness pathetic. Ryan admits that just swinging a weapon around isn't always the answer. Looking at Evan, he says that experience is now a proud memory. He vows to train with a shield, explaining that if he can use it to protect people, he wants to fight as part of a team. Our protagonist tells him to just focus on defense and leave the attacking to everyone else. He imagines their team Shine as the unbreakable shield Ryan, the Silent Knight, and Bilawa the Blood Witch, all united as one formidable party. This prompts Ryan to ask if Evan plans on fighting too. Evan thinks his position as the Knight Captain makes his participation a no-brainer. Shine questions if it's really necessary for him to take such a risk, and Bellowa chimes in telling the captain there's no need for him to fight at all. He thanks her and explains that he has to enter the dungeon, but assures them he'll support the team from the back lines without getting into direct combat. He reminds them he's been studying alchemy under Bernard. Ryan is shocked that such high-level training even exists anymore. Evan just says he was lucky to find a skilled teacher, promising to provide support from the rear, while Shine and Bellowa vow to protect him. Upon arrival, their carriages pull into Steema, a well-known hot springs town. Shine admits he's never been to a hot spring before, and Bellowa confesses it's her first time too. Ryan says he's never visited one either, and it's also a first for Evan. The Marquis wonders if our boy can handle the heat, but Evan replies that the hotter the water, the better it is for you. He's not about to miss this chance. On the way, the Marquis remarks that hot springs don't care about social status unlike people, but he jokingly adds that they do still care about gender. He tells Bellowa she'll have to use the women's side, which earns him a sharp look as she snaps at Shine to be quiet. The group arrives at the inn and Evan heads inside to find Shine and Ryan unpacking in their room. He asks if they're all settled. Shine asks what he's doing there, remembering he was supposed to go to the hot spring with the Marquis, but Evan says he decided to rest up first. Shine then asks if they're going to check out the nearby dungeon, guessing that's the real reason his captain stayed behind. Evan denies it, reminding him that he's not nearly strong enough for that yet. Shine presses him, asking why he'd even bring it up, and Evan just says they'll get to it eventually. Ryan explains that there are only 3 dungeons in the world massive enough to have a city built around them: the Silk Line's Sheeton, the Magic Kingdom's Monner Ferrarati, and the Commerce Nation Bay Pico's Murden. Besides those 3, there are plenty of small and medium-sized dungeons, but only the major ones in the dungeon cities grant level-ups to the humans who clear them. Curious Shine asks about the dungeon right here in town. Evan explains that it's off-limits to most people because of its high difficulty, though it's cleared out regularly to keep monsters from spilling into town. Apparently, if left alone for too long, artifacts can form or a part of the dungeon itself might even turn into one. Shine asks if they're planning on nabbing a mansion or something. Evan declares he's going to bring a whole hot spring back and build a new one in their own city. Inside the hot spring, Shine nervously eyes the steaming water, asking Evan if he's sure this is safe, and claiming he'll die if he gets in. Our boy just tells him to look at everyone else already soaking, including his own father. But Shine protests that his father is a demigod and he's much weaker by comparison. Evan just grabs his towel, tells him if he's going to die, he might as well get it over with, and kicks him straight into the water. The demigod hits the water with a huge splash, yelling and flailing. After a moment, he stops thrashing and mutters about the heat until he suddenly relaxes completely. He admits it actually feels amazing, and our protagonist agrees. As they're soaking, Shine asks if the water really has healing properties. Evan explains that it's way better than normal healing magic, which just soothes muscle aches. This hot spring, on the other hand, heals actual injuries and even strengthens muscles, making them better than before. Ryan praises Evan's insight, noting that this is precisely why knights in ancient times received long-term training in STEM. Shine leans in and quietly wonders if the spring's magical properties could enhance skill proficiency after a training session. Evan flashes a smile and turns back, asking if he's ready for the hot springs now, to which Shine eagerly agrees. Later, the 3 of them step out in matching blue attire, and Evan notes the clothes are exactly the same as they were in the game. He remembers players used to complain that they looked too Japanese, so the design was later changed to a more general East Asian style. He muses that the world's culture must not be based on Earth as he ponders the outfit's true origin. Ryan remarks that they look just like the traditional clothing from his homeland, suggesting the town's founders might have come from the same place. Evan is surprised that someone actually recognizes the origin of the clothes. Soon after, Lua arrives and asks how he found the hot springs, and he explains. Bella enters and starts walking toward him, just as a boy with white hair bursts onto the scene. He pushes forward, boasting about his high status and announcing himself as Kroon Ferrari, son of the Grand Duke. Evan immediately recalls him as the only NPC in the game who introduces himself without being prompted, an important side character, and the eldest son of a famous ducal family. When confronted, Crow angrily demands to know who dared say his full name, only to freeze solid when he lays eyes on Maris Owen D. Sheridan. He quickly apologizes, insisting that the young lady had done nothing wrong. He claims he was only asking questions because he was so taken by her beauty. Our protagonist remembers that Kroon later becomes a skilled magic swordsman and decides it's better to let his father handle the situation than to risk embarrassing himself. At that moment, the Marquis acknowledges Bella's beauty, but then grips Crow's shoulder and demands to know if he touched her, which the boy vehemently denies. Belawa apologizes for causing a scene, but Evan reassures her with a kind word and calls her pretty, earning a thankful smile. Finally, the Marquis introduces Evan as his second son, Stunning Crow. Our hero politely greets him with a bow, introducing himself as the second son of the Sharan family. Crow then asks if Belawa is part of Evan's personal employ. Evan confirms he hired her herself, then asks if Crow still has business with her. The young noble admits that he does, calling her the prettiest girl he has ever seen. He then boldly turns to the Marquis to ask for permission to challenge Evan to a duel for Belawa. As things get underway, Croon Ferrari points at Evan and formally challenges him to a duel for Belawa. Our hero wonders if this guy is mentally stuck in the Middle Ages, but Marquis Sharan finds the whole thing amusing, commenting that Crow is a real man. As the challenger starts to speak, the Marquis cuts him off, but then changes his mind, permitting the duel and telling his son to go for it. The protagonist yells in disbelief, wondering what on earth possessed his father to agree to that. He clears his throat and refuses, stating that Belawa is not a prize to be won, and they cannot fight over her. In response, Crow immediately changes the terms, suggesting she be set free if he wins. Only then would he ask her if she wants to work for him. Evan, realizing he hadn't thought of that, agrees to the duel, deciding to respect her choice in the matter. The Marquis steps in to set the rules, banning all weapons and mana, allowing only hand-to-hand combat, which Crow confidently accepts. The Marquis signals for them to start right away, then whispers to his son to go easy on him, reminding him that Crow is not a knight captain. As the duel begins, Evan steps forward to face his challenger. He agrees on the condition that neither of them holds a grudge afterward, and Crow accepts without a moment's hesitation. Our protagonist slams his foot against the floor and settles into a fighting stance, while Ryan, Bella, and Shine watch intently. The challenger's body flares with a blue aura as he rushes forward, closing the gap in an explosive burst of speed. Evan decides to dodge and test his reaction time. When the strike misses, he slips to the side, spots an opening, and lands a single blow that sends Crow flying backward, leaving him motionless on the floor. In utter disbelief, Evan can only comment on the ridiculously anticlimactic outcome. Shine explains that it happened because he in fact hit him. Still unconvinced, our hero presses for a real explanation until Shine clarifies and Maris declares him the winner. Afterwards, our protagonist mulls over Crow's background. He recalls that Crow trained in both magic and swordsmanship from a very young age, a combination that should have made him a much more formidable opponent. He reasons that the weakness stems from focusing on magic over physical combat. He laughs, remarking how fortunate it was that mana wasn't allowed. The Marquis insists his victory was simply because he was stronger, but Evan downplays it. He claims Crow is likely far more skilled in magic, and that's the only reason the duel ended so quickly. His humility earns high praise from his father. Nearby, Ryan and Shine note his astounding lack of self-awareness, while Belawa steps forward to compliment his impressive performance. She offers him a handkerchief, explaining she brought it to wipe his sweat, though she admits the fight ended too quickly for that. Evan thanks her, and across the room, Ryan's healing magic stirs Crow back to consciousness. He promptly springs to his feet, which earns Ryan praise from our protagonist for his skill. After the duel, Crow formally concedes defeat. Evan calls it an amazing move, explaining he only won because of the many restrictions and a stroke of luck. The boy agrees, but insists he wasn't giving it his all, declaring he wants a rematch someday, without anyone holding back. Our protagonist refuses, saying he has no reason to fight him again. Still, Crow insists there is a reason, and vows to return once he's more confident in his strength. Reflecting on it, Evan admits he risked his life by accepting the challenge and is now tangled up with the Ferrati family deeper than he ever intended. Shine offers to handle Crow if he causes trouble again, telling Evan not to waste his time on him. Our boy praises him for the thoughtful gesture. At that moment, Marquis Marcus notices Maelor's presence and decides it's proper to go and greet him. He tells the group to rest up while asking his son to join him. Evan complains, but his father insists, reminding him that as an aristocrat, he has a duty to socialize and cooperate with others to protect the world. The kid understands, but dreads dealing with the Ferratis. When they meet, Maelor greets the Marquis warmly, and the Marquis replies that he is in good health before complimenting Mrs. Ferrate on her beauty. She thanks him graciously, then shifts her gaze to our protagonist, remarking on how handsome he's become and asking if he remembers her. He politely answers that he remembers her faintly. As he begins to greet her properly, she insists he call her Mrs. Ferrate. The Marquis notes that Evan's eyes resemble his own, as Mrs. Ferrate recalls the boy's age. She then realizes he's the same age as their daughter Alicia and calls the girl forward. As Alicia approaches, she greets the Marquis politely, and our boy remembers that while she never directly killed him, she was always the root cause of his deaths. The Marquis compliments her looks, and she thanks him. Maylor turns to the Marquis and asks if he recalls their promise. With a grin, the Marquis replies that the eldest child must lead the family, so he isn't bound to it. He adds that he remembers the plan was to unite their second or third children, and Mellor laughs, teasing the boy for acting shy. During introductions, Alicia formally presents herself, and Evan responds hesitantly with his full name, and they exchange formal greetings. He recognizes her as Alicia von Ferrate, his betrothed. Because of their engagement, she resides in Shiran, where she later meets the Dungeon City's protagonist and betrays her fiancé by supporting him. All of this eventually led to her fiancé's despair and suicide, making her the primary cause of his many deaths. He admits his own fault in the matter, having mingled with other women despite being engaged. But if events follow the original game's plot, Alicia will become his biggest death flag. Meanwhile, their parents admire how good the two look together, calling it fate. Later that evening, the Marquis asks how the hot springs were, and Evan admits he loved them. He adds that he finds the waters dangerously tempting, recalling a game route where he dies from staying in too long. When his father suggests another soak after dinner, Evan agrees, adding that they should build one in their own city too. When the idea is brought up, Evan's father admits that having a hot spring in their city would be fantastic. He explains that creating one requires a very specific environment, making it nearly impossible to do. While hot water can be made artificially, a true hot spring with special benefits can't be created with just that. Our boy admits his father is right and asks how geography changes when a dungeon forms. Pressing for more details, the Marquis recognizes his son's keen interest and explains that a dungeon naturally forms when there are objects powerful enough to influence the environment or when a monster of immense strength is present. A powerful mage who has fully mastered their abilities can also alter the environment to form a dungeon, though the exact mechanics of it are not yet fully understood. Evan then asks if a hot spring could be created instead by using a powerful enough item. His father considers the possibility, noting it might work if the item shares properties with a hot spring, though the formation time would be uncertain. Evan explains that a healing hot spring in their city would greatly boost efficiency for dungeon explorers, which makes his father suspicious of his intentions. The Marquis asks if he already has an idea. That night, workers dig under Evan's watchful gaze. One asks if this is truly the right spot, and he confirms it, explaining that something valuable is buried near the dungeon. They begin to question the source of this rumor, but before they can finish, a worker named Ryan calls out that he's found something. From inside the pit, they unearth a large stone slab. A month later, Evan returns and the conversation quickly shifts to his sudden bathhouse business idea. His father assigns a man named Eric to listen closely as Evan explains the plan. He emphasizes that location is everything, since the bathhouse must be near the dungeon. He adds that it shouldn't be too far from the pharmacy and needs to be right on the main road. A large space is also necessary since they can't just open several smaller branches. Therefore, the hot spring itself must be large, and the entrance fee will be set high to match its scale and appeal. During their discussion, the Marquis points out that while the brothers' pharmacy caters to common folk, the new bathhouse is clearly aimed at explorers. Evan argues that the hot spring's effects are totally worth the cost, since getting healed up quickly means adventurers can get back into the dungeons that much sooner. Eric chimes in saying it'll also help the dungeon city grow, calling it a flawless business plan. He can't help but wonder how the temple will react considering the hot spring has healing properties of its own. Our protagonist reassures him that they're on good terms with the temple, and he's sure even the priests will become regulars. Inwardly, he's convinced it'll be even more popular than Steema's hot springs from Demon War 3, plus with a healing hot spring so close, his own survival odds just shot way up. He also mentions they have Mr. Bernard to boost the water's medicinal potency. Just then, Bernard himself walks in, telling Evan to get his hand out of the way. Bernard admits he was curious about what Evan was up to in the capital, jokingly complaining that he came back with a whole hot spring. He asks if the source is the stone slab, and our boy confirms that it is. Evan prompts Bernard to explain that it's a piece of a dungeon core powerful enough to alter the environment, but not capable of creating an actual dungeon. Evan agrees, saying water this good shouldn't be for his use alone, and then cheekily asks Bernard if he's a fan of hot springs. Eric remarks that it only makes sense, given Bernard is the man who's created cures for countless diseases. The alchemist inspects the slab and concludes it's impossible to alter. He adds that it will serve as the very source of the hot spring, amplifying its effects. He tells Evan that the rest can be managed using alchemy and medicinal botany. Full of conviction, Bernard declares they'll create a hot spring even better than Stima's. He then asks for free access for himself and the brothers' pharmacy, a deal Evan happily accepts. Evan then turns to his father, requesting a plot of land near the bathhouse to build a training facility for the dungeon knights. The Marquis asks for the reasoning, and Evan explains that the knights could train hard and then head straight to the baths to recover. The Marquis exclaims it's a brilliant idea. Our boy thinks to himself that the hot spring will make the knights stronger, which in turn increases his own chances of survival. Bernard says they should get started immediately and asks for his help, to which Evan eagerly agrees. Over at the construction site, workers are busy hauling timber and hammering away at the framework, with Evan personally guiding the positioning and making adjustments. 2 men carry a heavy beam past a column, marked with a magic seal. Inside, Bernard is examining the mana-powered machinery, warning that the stone's output isn't enough to sustain the whole setup. Our protagonist adds that the goal is to have a fully functional facility right from the get-go. Bernard stresses the importance of a solid foundation before cutting in again to insist that the current setup simply won't work. He explains that they'll need an additional artifact to work alongside the Mana Stone. He elaborates on the need for a mana aggregate, something that can produce a constant stream of mana to sustain the facility's core. He declares they'll need at least 5 of them. In response, our boy immediately identifies it as the mana tank process, which clearly surprises the alchemist. Bernard admits that it would definitely boost efficiency, but he laments having traded away all his old artifacts that would have been perfect for the job. Evan asks where they are now, prompting the man to admit they're long gone. Just then, the youth reveals several similar artifacts from his own collection. He announces they can use the ones he brought back from the capital. Bernard eyes them suspiciously, wondering aloud if Evan raided the palace treasury. Our protagonist casually replies that he acquired them from all over the city, mostly from a jeweler's shop. At last, the alchemist nods in approval, confirming they'll work. Our boy then offers to help with the process, seeing it as the perfect opportunity for some hands-on alchemy training. Later in the training yard, the knight captain approaches Evan. He reminds him not to neglect his combat practice, stressing that this is the age where growth is most critical. Evan acknowledges his point, but the captain then brings up the report he received about a duel with the son of the Ferretti family. He notes that the young master has already made a name for himself with his martial arts, warning him that more challengers will surely come looking for a fight now. Evan tries to wave it off, insisting he didn't do anything special, but the knight is convinced otherwise. He offers to teach Evan a skill he learned in the dungeons to help protect his growing reputation. Without a moment's hesitation, he reveals the skill. It's a martial arts technique meant to completely dominate the battlefield heaven's weight. Right before his eyes, Evan watches as energy gathers in the captain's fist, his entire body enveloped in a swirling heavy aura. The captain explains the skill's purpose is to infuse every single movement with immense weight. He adds that he believes the young master can wield it with even greater efficiency. Our boy questions if such a skill can even be taught, but the captain simply ignores him and charges forward, forcing Evan to desperately defend himself. Afterward, our exhausted protagonist is collapsed over his desk when Mabel comes in to announce that it's time for his etiquette lessons. He begs for just a moment to recover, but she brings up how Shine got a bracelet and Belois got earrings while she received nothing at all. He quickly insists that he didn't forget about her, he just couldn't find the right moment to give her a gift. Evan then produces a beautiful necklace, telling her to always wear it as the mascot of the brothers' pharmacy, and as proof that she acts on his authority. She beams, clutching the necklace and vowing to treasure it forever. And even though he tries to downplay the gift, she just laughs happily. In the days that follow, his mornings are once again filled with etiquette lessons. His afternoons are filled with alchemy training at the Brotherhood bathhouse site, and his free time is consumed by Heaven's Weight practice, with the knight captain, all while continuing his slime training. The small creatures float between his hands, and Evan grins proudly as he manages to summon 4 at once. Though his mana drains quickly, he collapses onto the grass, only to force himself back up, knowing he must hurry, since the Brotherhood bathhouse is almost complete. During their training, the knight captain orders Evan to strike harder and put more weight into his fists. He does as he's told, earning praise from the captain. The captain explains that heaviness is the secret to Heaven's Weight. Once Evan gets used to it, he'll be able to infuse mana into his punches for even greater force. Calling him a combat genius, the captain admits he wasn't even sure the skill could be taught in the first place. Our boy jokes that being uncertain is no excuse, just as Belois steps in with a towel, which he accepts with a word of thanks. On this very day, the Brotherhood bathhouse officially opens. While the Marquis points out the design, our protagonist notes that Stima's style leaned heavily toward an Eastern aesthetic. He explains his decision to give the place a more Western design. Just then, Shine notices a strange device that catches his attention. As they approach the vending machine, Evan explains how it works. You insert a silver coin, choose a drink, press the button, and collect your beverage. He demonstrates by picking a coffee milk, which drops neatly into the tray, prompting a curious Shine to try it for himself. He continues the tour, describing the build and mentioning the space-expanding artifacts and cooling magic that power the custom vending machines in both changing rooms. Bernard recalls what a pain the project was to assemble and calibrate. He warns that the drinks had better live up to the hype, but Evan remains confident, promising satisfaction. Shine compares the heat of the water to Stemma's famous springs. Evan explains they used a giant artifact in the bathtubs to both purify the hot spring water and boost its effects. Bernard adds that an herbal concentrate is regularly mixed into the water to enhance it even further, also pointing out that the vending machine was entirely the protagonist's idea. The Marquis declares it's going to be a massive hit, while Shine asks if Benoit and the other women will like it, to which Raihan confidently replies that they will. Bernard turns and asks Evan if he's content with the final result. Our boy answers that it will definitely be profitable, though the old alchemist remarks that there's just one problem making Evan ask what it is. At that moment, Maybelle appears at the entrance, where a crowd is shouting that 1 silver coin is enough to buy a full meal. Some yell that no one will come if it's that expensive, calling it nonsense, and as the protests grow, an explorer insists the entrance fee should be lowered. Another suggests they should just boycott the place, and more agree, starting a chant of, "We won't go." Seeing the enraged crowd, Maybelle calls out to Evan, but he calmly assures her that everything is fine. She greets a customer who drops a bag of coins on the counter, as Evan explains that there are explorers in the city who spend a gold coin just to travel to the 30th floor of the dungeon. He adds that if they're willing to pay that, once they try the bathhouse for 20 silver coins, the results will speak for themselves. Inside the bath, an explorer mutters that the price is insane, while another feels his energy recovering rapidly from the fresh herbs. Another man says it feels like his very soul is being purified, and declares it was worth every last coin. A large man stands up in the steaming water. He orders the others to inform the guild that anyone who doesn't bathe at the Brotherhood bathhouse before exploring the dungeon will not be allowed to go. Evan thinks to himself that this method of advertising is much more efficient. In the bathhouse, one man cups the water in his hand, calling it a miracle, while another declares that the gods must have created this place to cleanse their souls. Evan figures that people will eventually have to admit the Brotherhood bathhouse is worth paying 20 silver coins. He adds that once the rumors spread, even explorers who think the price is too high will still come at least once out of curiosity. Our boy knows the bathhouse does more than just ease fatigue. It restores the body's fundamentals, making dungeon expeditions significantly safer. Evan emphasizes how it accelerates growth, pointing out the massive gap that will soon form between those who use it and those who don't. With non-users inevitably being left behind, 2 explorers relax in the water praising the facility. One man calls it amazing, remarking that 20 silver coins might not even cover the costs, while another simply calls it a blessing from the heavens. At the dungeon entrance, a guild leader asks if everyone has visited the Brotherhood bathhouse, prompting the entire group to roar back that they have. Fired up to reach the 40th floor and catch the front runners, the Yellow Drake Guild charges ahead. From a distance, bystanders murmur about wanting to go too. One person explains that nobles and commoners alike now use it before raids, all thanks to the Marquis's new policy. Others also vow to visit once they get stronger, as Evan watches veteran explorers raid more efficiently thanks to his bathhouse. Even the newbies are training harder than ever, dreaming of the day they can finally try it for themselves. With the entry fee and exclusive drinks only adding to its allure, getting in is a privilege reserved for high-ranking explorers. Later, the Marquis reviews some papers. He notes that everything is proceeding exactly as Evan planned, with profits soaring. He realizes that the pure profits from the bathhouse exceed those of all 4 of the brothers' pharmacy branches combined. It's great for frontline explorers, he thinks. He considers it even more suited to lower-floor adventurers and slum citizens who can't afford help from a priest. Since the pharmacy caters to a different crowd, the difference in profits is only natural. He also sees that the money poured into the bathhouse far surpasses what was spent on the pharmacies. The Marquis explains that the cost had to come from his own pocket. Recalling the vassal's outrage, a heated meeting takes place in the Marquis' office, where a man slams the desk in fury. He says they weren't allowed to invest, accusing him of bias since the project belonged to Evan. He insists on his loyalty, but demands answers only to be told to calm down. The Marquis clarifies that he never invested in the bathhouse and that it only accepts funds when it's short on resources. Mention of the pharmacy's profits follows, revealing Evan contributed both his skills and his personal funds. The man leans back stunned, admitting he never would have imagined it. Evan muses that some vassals are far too obsessed with money. At that moment, he gestures toward Randolph as a prime example of greed. The Marquis declares the bathhouse is Evan's alone, untouchable by anyone else. He says greed always follows the scent of coins, yet he praises the boy's progress, though with an apologetic sigh, he admits Evan may be carrying too much too soon. Our protagonist reassures him that it's fine, privately reminding himself that every move he makes is to avoid his own death. Afterward, he works on pricing adjustments and unveils his next plan, a special membership system ranked by contributions to dungeon raids. He lays out the tiered cards and explains how the higher ranks will push people to work harder, strengthening both the bathhouse and the city. Mabel remarks that it could motivate the citizens, and Evan agrees. He also adds that it will forge a city less reliant on a single chosen hero. Finally, Mabel admits she doesn't fully understand, but she insists he is already invaluable. She says that she can't imagine the city without him, and calls him someone the dungeon city truly needs. He refuses to let himself die or watch the city fall, knowing a world bound to just one hero risks disaster. Evan vows to change it by building an order where the city thrives on its own, securing not only its survival, but his own. Inside the pharmacy, Evan presents potions gems and ingots, announcing them as the results of his alchemy lesson. Bernard inspects a gem, acknowledging his improvement. Our boy jokingly suggests he should be the one to handle closing duties at the pharmacy. Bernard stays silent but retorts sharply as Hannah listens nearby. Outside, the old alchemist dismisses the employees, praising their hard work. 2 workers invite him to the bathhouse, which he readily accepts. Hannah then invites the protagonist as well, and he agrees to join. At the bathhouse, he's greeted by 2 men. They're already soaking and confirm they've just finished training. Shine explains he has caught up on all the lessons he missed during his time in the capital. Evan turns to Ryan, who admits he's still behind, but is learning a lot from Shine. The swordsman adds that he still has plenty to learn from the Holy Knight's training. Ryan explains that he has built up his strength but lacks formal weapons training. In response, the young master tells him not to dwell on it, assuring him that he's simply progressing differently. He adds that Ryan only needs to make up for what he lacks, pointing out the versatility of shield arts. The trainee realizes what he means. Evan confirms that he'll begin shield training tomorrow and that everything is already prepared. As he walks away, a familiar voice calls out to him. He sees Serena and Hannah, who both greet him after such a long time apart. He greets Serena and asks if she visits often, which she confirms she does. He acknowledges the benefits of the hot springs, but warns her that drinking beer will cancel them out. She then asks about his guard, and Ryan introduces himself formally. He explains that he is training to become worthy of standing beside his master. Hannah mentions she works at the pharmacy, while Serena shares that she is at the temple. Later in a training yard, our boy presents a large shield he found in storage. Ryan thanks him, declaring that from now on he will protect him with this shield. Our protagonist shakes his head and tells him no, explaining that the shield isn't all that great. He adds that he's only giving it to him for training, warning him never to use it in a real situation. Ryan protests that he should have been told that earlier. Evan adds they would both end up dead if he tried to use it for actual protection. When asked what he means, Evan asks Ryan if he's ever heard of a cursed item, which gets a reaction out of him. Evan explains that cursed artifacts exist items that can weaken their owners. When Ryan wonders if the shield is one of them, Evan shakes his head. Evan explains that sometimes perfectly good artifacts get mistaken for cursed items and just tossed aside. He adds that this shield is different and he knows its true value from the game. Our boy also admits that in real life, judging artifacts is a lot trickier. Ryan presses him, demanding to know its real power. Evan replies that if you block an attack with the Echo Shield, the enemy gets hit back 2 times as hard. Right away, Ryan blurts out that it definitely sounds like a cursed item. Evan clarifies that blocking 1 strike actually counts as blocking 2, doubling his shield skill proficiency. On top of that, the efficiency jumps up 4-fold if Ryan wears the Iron Wall Knight's full plate armor while he trains. He adds that a certain necklace multiplies it 8-fold, but Evan tells him not to get bogged down in the details and just get a feel for it. The shield, the armor, and the necklace are all bugged items glitched out by some unknown influence. When urged to try it, Ryan looks a little lost at first. Then he lets out a sudden roar and charges forward, blocking the incoming blows with his shield. Evan notes that he's adapting quickly, but warns him that he's bleeding from his side, telling him to heal up as he fights. A golden light wraps around Ryan as he chants to the battle god, his wounds knitting themselves closed. Still, he holds his ground while the green aura on his shield glows even brighter. Evan presses the attack, his own body enveloped in swirling energy. Meanwhile, the necklace, which is supposed to drain its wearer's mana to summon countless wind arrows, instead fires them straight at Ryan. Oddly enough, it consumes barely any mana, and since it's a growth-type item, it'll get stronger right along with him. The armor is just as weird. It was flagged by a coding error as a shield instead of armor, so it just sat in storage instead of getting scrapped. Worn by itself, it actually leaks damage. But if the user braces themselves as if they're holding a shield, it functions just like one. Paired with an actual shield, it's as if two are raised at once, doubling his blocking potential. Together with the Echo Shield, their combined effect massively magnifies training efficiency. Blocking the summoned arrows creates the perfect training regimen for his shield arts. Satisfied, Evan steps back to let Ryan train on his own. He then turns to Shine and says that it's time for some proper instruction. Shine quickly realizes this isn't going to be your ordinary dagger drill. Evan reminds him that after 2 years of experience, he's already skilled enough to take on knights. Shine snaps back that those battles weren't exactly his choice, since the knights ambushed him while he was training alone. Even so, Evan points out that it sharpened his divine sight and combat sense. Shine mutters something about the butler's transcendent sight skill. The young master admits that at first he just wanted his friends to survive the dungeons, but now they've grown strong enough to actually enter one, though Shine knows he still hasn't reached the level of strength he needs. During their training, Shine admits he's still not strong enough, and Evan agrees with him. He says that's just how it is for a demigod. Our boy draws one of his twin blades and explains that it's a skill he learned with them called Bloody Shadow. He explains that the more blood coats the daggers, the faster his movements become, and it even restores stamina. Evan then comments that it's a fitting skill for someone who specializes in fighting multiple opponents. He adds that it's a technique that improves with experience and grows even more powerful over time. Our protagonist insists it can only be developed through real battle, but being an alchemist, he immediately counters his own point. He tells him to simply get blood on the blades instead. Shine immediately wonders if he's being told to go out and kill people. Evan quickly clarifies the situation and produces several bottles filled with a red liquid. At that moment, the boy asks if it's actually blood, and Evan confirms it is monster blood, to be precise. He adds that it's mostly from goblins, with each bottle containing blood from a different type of creature. Bloody Shadow boosts physical abilities, but it also puts a heavy strain on the body. That makes it dangerous to train with as a child. Evan had originally planned for Shine to get some dungeon experience first, but now he believes the demigod has grown much stronger than he expected. The youth agrees, and credits certain local facilities that help replenish stamina, saying he can train the skill much faster than anticipated. Evan explains further, saying that the training isn't about how much blood coats the blades. He adds that it's about how many different types are applied within a set time, along with how much movement he does in that same span. This makes Shine realize why Evan prepared so many different kinds of blood. The young master then instructs him to coat the daggers in a very specific order. He explains that running a 100-meter dash back and forth after each application is the most efficient training method. Shine stands there in shock, admitting he's worried he'll be mistaken for something dangerous. Evan then asks if he'd rather stick to his current training methods instead. Shine panics for a second, before quickly agreeing to follow the new method. Meanwhile, our boy starts thinking about Bellewa, who always leaves right after finishing her duties. She always says she's going to work on her lamp training, though he senses she's definitely hiding a secret. Evan has never asked about it before, since he just assumed it was nothing bad. But now that they have to enter the dungeon together, he feels the need to check on her progress and resolves to uncover the truth. 2 hours later, he's searched everywhere she might have slipped off to, but finds nothing. He figures that if she really had something to hide, she wouldn't pick an obvious spot. A voice calls out, and Madame Miriam is standing nearby, holding Liz, flanked by maids. She notices Evan rushing around and asks what he is looking for. He greets her politely, then apologizes for being in such a rush, and asks if she has seen Bellewa. He explains that he has some urgent business with the girl, but can't find her anywhere. The lady seems surprised, asking if he really doesn't know that Radine has been teaching Bellewa tea ceremonies, flower arrangements, and etiquette. Evan is shocked, wondering why on earth his mother would be teaching her those things. Miriam answers that it's because she considers the girl a potential mistress for him and is training her accordingly. He shouts in disbelief, protesting that he doesn't even have a wife, and besides, the child is only 9 years old. Miriam points out that it strikes our protagonist that it's been a whole 3 years since he last had tea with his mother. He also realizes Bellowa's skills have been improving at an unusually rapid pace. He suspects she might be developing a special skill through training with his mother, much like how the butler and the headmaid earned theirs. In this world, training consistently for months often forges a new skill, and mastery is achieved through relentless dedication. He considers that Bellowa's mana abilities have grown unexpectedly, while she's been enduring etiquette lessons, but he quickly dismisses the thought as impossible. He heads straight for the door, knocks firmly, and announces his presence. His mother opens it with the young girl standing right behind her. Evan gets straight to the point, asking Radine why she concealed the fact that she's a mage. She meets his gaze, acknowledging that he's figured out her secret. Evan presses on, demanding to know why she hid her identity, and asks if his father is aware. Radine admits his father doesn't know for certain, but has likely guessed the truth. She explains that the Sharan family is notorious for its complete lack of magical talent. When she asks how he knew, the protagonist agrees to answer and lists 4 key reasons. First, the tea she and Bellawa were drinking was Ephoronic tea. Second, the notebook by the teacups is an artifact designed to encrypt whatever is written inside. Third, there's an old lamp that continues to glow faintly even after being switched off. All of this proves she was using magic right before he arrived. And fourth, Bellawa's rapid growth couldn't possibly come from lamp training alone. He declares that this can only mean his mother has been personally teaching her. Radine remarks on his sharp ability to gauge another's progress, observing that he must have secrets of his own. He then adds one final point: while his father has been aging normally, she hasn't aged a day. At this, she steps forward and tells him to listen very carefully. She insists that she only looks young, making sure he understands the distinction. When he nods, she asks him what he knows about witches. He recalls that it's just what people call female mages, and she seems relieved that his knowledge doesn't go any deeper. Our boy listens intently as Radina begins to explain the true nature of witches. He quickly understands she is referring to a hidden species, not a profession, describing them as female demihumans, whose powers are inherited through their bloodline, blessed with abundant mana and exceptional control. She mentions an ancient legend in which God created them and hid them among humans to protect the world. She admits she knows little beyond that, and he processes this new information by likening them to demigods. Radine continues, saying she traveled the world while hiding her identity until she fell in love with his father. After their marriage, she stepped away from worldly affairs and chose to live as a normal human named Radine Detion. In his head, Evan flashes back to his past life, remembering how he played every single Demon War game and all of its DLC. He knows almost everything, but not the full picture, since he wasn't a developer. He notes that not once did the games ever mention that witches were a race of demihumans. He wonders how such critical information could have been missing from the lore. Then it hits him: there's only one possible explanation: the sequel. That would explain everything. Unless Earth was destroyed, a new game in the series was bound to come out. He just never expected to find himself living inside it. Radine explains that since they never had a daughter, her witch lineage couldn't be passed down. She admits, however, that Evan still carries a tiny fraction of witch blood because he isn't female. She believes an unfortunate side effect of this is his pronounced lack of magical talent. That is, until she found Bellawa a child with the potential to become a witch. Meanwhile, our protagonist knows Bellawa is a demigod and wonders if demihumans, witches, and demigods are all connected. Evan realizes this means Bellawa is going to gain powers she never had in Demon War 3. Finally, Radine says that this is what has led them to the current situation. She asks if her explanation is enough, and he cautiously agrees. She praises his intelligence before asking for his secrets in return, pointing out that it's only fair after she shared hers. He realizes a Demon War 5 might exist, but he has absolutely zero information about it. He figures it's safer to share his secret with his mother, especially since she appears to be connected to the sequel's plot. Deciding to plan ahead and avoid raising any new death flags, our boy begins to explain, framing it all as a prophetic dream. Later, we see Evan walking across the manor grounds as servants whisper about him. They comment on his bizarre habits and training routines right up until he comes face to face with Shine in the garden. Shine gives it another shot, telling a hilarious story about the gardener that nearly makes Evan break his composure. The young master calls this Immortality Project Number 5 Perfect Poker Face, a mission to hide his emotions in any situation, though he admits he's a bit out of practice. A few days earlier, Bellowa had told him that his smile truly makes other people happy. However, he tripped right after she said it, smashing a teacup. As she rushed to his side, he remembered something crucial. His 12th birthday and his formal debut into high society were fast approaching. He admits that if he smiled at everyone, the death flags would skyrocket. Evan brushes off Shine's suggestion to stop training, reminding him that an aristocrat's 12th birthday is a serious affair. The butler recalls how extravagant young Master Eric's party had been filled with foreign nobles and guildmasters. Our protagonist notes that such events mean many women will be attending, which he sees as a huge problem. He insists that a perfect poker face is necessary to avoid any unwanted trouble. Shine questions his fear, suggesting women could just be friends like Mabel or Bellowa, but Evan dismisses the idea. At that moment, Bellowa interrupts with a letter from the palace. He freezes solid as he reads the letter, shouting in disbelief that he's received a message from the crown. Bellowa explains the Marquis reviewed it before sending her. Desperate to avoid the one person he fears most, Evan presses her for reassurance. She can't offer any comfort as the letter reveals the king himself plans to attend his birthday. The Marquis roars in frustration, complaining that even after rejecting the king's proposal, he's still being pressured. Evan's mother warns her husband not to underestimate her, reminding him that their second son is special. The Marquis counters that the king won't get his way, because Evan plans to announce his intention to become a dungeon knight captain at the party. Shine reacts with surprise, but the young master insists that's precisely the point. Our boy believes the king's real aim is to arrange a marriage with the princess. He figures that by becoming a knight, he can sidestep the political marriage, vowing to crush this death flag before it's even raised. Inside the estate, the staff are preparing frantically as he checks in with Mabel about the arrangements. She explains that everything is being redone from scratch now that the king has announced his visit. Evan suggests shifting the focus away from the royal guest, but Mabel insists he must remain the star of the show. She hands him the stage plan, and as he scans it, he asks in disbelief if it's for real. Mabel just nods. His eyes instantly light up when he realizes just how many cute girls are coming to his birthday party. In a flashback, Evan questions the decision to hire a popular all-female minstrel group for his party. Mabel grins while explaining they are simply girls who are eager to meet aristocrats. She explains that she promised them a meeting, and his autograph and offer they accepted instantly. Our protagonist glares in frustration, accusing her of selling him out without his consent. Muttering about yet another death flag, he reviews the plans and starts pointing out the numerous fixes still needed. Ignoring Mabel's protests about him micromanaging his own party, he instructs her to have the performers play a few quiet songs. Evan's plan is to step back once the king arrives, proposing to split the celebration into 2 parts. The first part will be for the king, and the second part, the real fun, will start after the VIPs have made an early exit. Later, Evan gathers his employees and invites all of them to his birthday party, assuring them that both the main shop and its branches will be open for the occasion. Some of them hesitate, worried they'll be out of place at such a high-class event, but he insists they must come. He adds one condition: they must all wear their brother's pharmacy uniforms to make it clear they are his personal guests. Hannah seems hesitant about the uniform rule, but Evan reminds her it's a necessary precaution with so many aristocrats around. Evan explains that even Servina must wear her priestess attire, though he offers to prepare a dress for her to wear during the second half after the important guests are gone. He then offers to get a suit for an older man known as Grandpa, but the man refuses. He says he doesn't want any attention while the king is there, but Evan tempts him by mentioning all the cute girls. Bernard asks if they're really that pretty, and Evan confirms they are adding, "They're the prettiest of the silk line and famous even in other kingdoms." Grandpa agrees, though he warns he will leave immediately if anyone bothers him. Afterward, our protagonist pays a visit to the butcher. He asks him to cook for the party, but the man panics at the thought of preparing food for so many important guests. The chef slams his hands down, scolding the young master for talking such nonsense. Evan explains that only a master chef would dare use such an herb, praising the man's unique talent and urging him to showcase it at the birthday party. He guarantees the aristocrats will absolutely love it, a promise that slowly starts to win over the hesitant cook. Evan continues explaining the irresistible charm of cooking fresh ingredients over an open flame. The chef finally relents, vowing to do his best, while Evan promises to take care of everything else. Back at the estate, Shine arrives with a stack of boxes explaining their address to him. Evan nods, confirming he'd ordered uniforms for Shine, Bellowa, and the other demigod kids who work for him. He declares that they'll all be wearing these uniforms to the party. A hesitant Shine asks if this means they'll be set apart from the other staff. Our boy answers plainly that yes, they are his trainees now and candidates for the Night Order he intends to form. Outside, servants are shouting for everyone to hurry, warning that they're running out of time. One confirms to Evan that security is perfect, but Bellowa reminds them it has to be flawless since His Majesty himself will be attending. He asks if the chefs hired for the day have been properly vetted. Mabel cuts in, telling him to leave it to her and go get his makeup done. Someone in the crowd points out a group of famously cute girls, while another person wonders how they managed to get an invitation. A voice comments that the young master must be surrounded by talented people. Hannah then asks if it's really okay for them to be there. Barnard replies that at a party hosted by the Marquis himself, no one would dare mess with the Brothers' Pharmacy. She asks if he's an aristocrat, but he sternly warns her that pretending to be one carries a punishment worse than death. He tells her to watch her mouth, then promptly asks for a drink. Meanwhile, in the dressing room, Mabel reports that everyone in the hall is buzzing about Evan singing his praises. Shine adds that many are also discussing the dungeon, prompting Evan to ask what they're saying. The knight explains that since the Great Change, no raid has made it past the 45th floor, even though explorers used to reach the 50th. Mabel hesitantly asks if he really plans to go right after his birthday, and he confirms with confidence. He admits he's going to enter the dungeon, but only plans to clear up to the 5th floor, leaving both of them completely stunned. Shine warns him that if the young master intends to fight the floor master, the Marquis will be absolutely terrified. Evan admits his original plan was to go all the way to the 10th floor. Shine quickly explains that a powerful floor master guards every 5 levels. He adds that no 12-year-old has ever beaten the 5th floor's master, and if the Marquis discovered the 10th floor plan, he'd likely be grounded for life. Evan says that's precisely why he'll stop at the 5th floor with the support of his Night Order and Vice Captain Shine. Shine blinks in confusion, asking who this Vice Captain is. Evan simply declares he's leaving all future training to him, pointedly calling him Vice Captain. Shine asks if he's joking, but just then the head maid arrives to announce that everything is ready. Our boy thanks her for her work. Before leaving, he asks the head maid to please keep what she just overheard a secret. She agrees, and Evan announces it's time to greet the guests. Inside, a man notices the Von Ferrati family making their entrance. Barnard calls a white-haired girl a pretty child, prompting Hannah to explain that she is Alicia Von Ferrati. Crow looks around for Bellowa, wondering if Alicia will make her entrance with Evan just as the girl clutches her face, clearly feeling unwell. Her father promises to take her to Evan as soon as he arrives, asking her to hold on a little longer. Elsewhere, Crow smirks, wondering just how much stronger Evan has become to be considered his rival. Alicia mutters that he's lying, but her father insists he's telling the truth. Just then, the Marquis and his wife make their grand entrance into the hall. Someone wonders where the Marquis' second wife is, and another guest replies she must be tending to their newborn. The Marquis then steps forward and thanks everyone for coming. On stage, he addresses the guests, fondly recalling the time when his first son turned 12. The Marquis then announces that they are gathered to celebrate his second son reaching that very same age as he prepares to introduce Evan. Backstage, Bellowa suddenly rushes in with an urgent message from the main gate, leaving the young master completely puzzled. Across the hall, the guest's attention is drawn to the opposite side of the stage as a golden staff strikes the floor with a resounding thud. The Emperor himself enters, with Princess Serena following close behind. He has arrived much earlier than expected, and Evan realizes with a jolt that the Emperor is here. The Emperor steps forward into the hall, flanked by armored guards with Princess Serena trailing just behind him. The Marquis approaches to inquire about the early arrival, politely reminding the Emperor that the event hasn't officially started yet. The Emperor responds graciously, accepting the invitation to enter, and the Marquis guides him further inside, walking respectfully by his side. Back on stage, the Marquis raises his voice, drawing the entire room's attention. He steps forward with arms spread wide to congratulate his son on his 12th birthday. Evan thanks him and vows to bring honor to the family name by serving the citizens to the best of his ability. However, the Marquis narrows his gaze, asking just what his son intends to do to bring about such honor. Models. Our boy takes a beat before dropping a bombshell. He's reforming the Dungeon Night Order. He names himself captain and swears to protect the city. Someone in the crowd points out the order was disbanded decades ago, while others wonder why he has to be the one to lead it. In response, the Emperor simply raises a hand and the room falls silent. He asks Evan if all the attention is getting to him, wondering if this is a rash decision, but the Marquis steps in, explaining that our boy isn't running away, he's choosing the dungeon. The Marquis asks Evan for confirmation, and he answers with a firm yes. Evan then tells the king he is fully prepared to take on the duties of the dungeon knight captain. He explains that he's already been gathering members, gesturing over to Shine Ryan and Balawa. People start whispering that he shouldn't be allowed in the dungeon until he's at least 18. Our protagonist declares he'll prove his resolve by entering the dungeon with Shine Ryan and Balawa. He adds that he'll go there with the goal of bringing back the head of the 5th floor's master. Hearing this, his father is completely shocked. The Marquis points out that Evan is still 6 years away from adulthood, let alone a captain. Evan acknowledges this, but insists it's necessary to earn the people's trust and prove his determination. Before the Marquis can respond, Michael steps forward and announces that he will vouch for him. He's vouching for Shine Ryan and Balawa, and the crowd recognizes the speaker as the famous Michael D. Erlock, the captain of the Iron Wall Knights. He explains that he's personally trained them for years and believes they're strong enough to stand alongside any other knights, assuring the gathering they have both the skill and talent to handle the 5th floor. Across the hall, the Marquis is furious. He can't believe a knight captain is actually endorsing his young son's plan to enter the dungeon. Michael proposes a duel as a way for them to prove their strength against the other knights. While leaving the decision to the Marquis, the king, clearly intrigued, orders our boy to prove himself right here and now. Evan accepts, and a few knights step forward until the two groups are facing each other in the center of the hall. Michael declares the rules for the match: both sword and magic are allowed. He raises his hand and signals for the duel to begin. An announcer officially calls the match It's 3 Royal Knights versus Shine Balawa and Ryan. He confirms that both sword and magic are fair game, and at his signal, the duel kicks off. The knights charge forward as the trio braces for impact. Ryan stands his ground and activates his Skill Guardian's blessing. The charging knight's swords suddenly jerk uncontrollably, allowing him to easily block and counter, sending 2 of them staggering back. In a flash, Shine darts in with blinding speed, landing a slash before his opponent can even react. Though one knight braces to counter, he finds his feet frozen solid to the floor as Balawa gathers a blazing fireball and launches it. That's enough for the announcer, who quickly steps in, calling a stop to the fight and declaring the duel over. He names Ryan and his teammates as the winners. A spectator observes Ryan's shield work, noting that a tanker like him would be invaluable in any situation. The same man also recognizes the high skill level of the others. The king reflects on the duel, wondering aloud if this is the hidden power of the Sharan. The Marquis just stands there, completely worried by their overwhelming strength. The king thinks Evan has already proven himself a worthy leader simply by putting these 3 together as a team. Yet he still questions Evan's own abilities, which makes our boy turn to the knight captain for a bit of help. The princess cheers him on from the crowd as he tells himself that backing down now would ruin his chances of entering the dungeon. Just then, Michael steps forward and declares himself Evan's opponent. Spectators comment that it's a perfect choice as Michael is suitable enough to test Evan's safety. The other knights whisper that they would die if they had to fight the young master, while Alicia watches with keen interest as the duel begins. In the center of the arena, the young master and Michael face each other in their fighting stances. The signal is given, and both launch forward at high speed. Michael closes the distance instantly, forcing Evan back until he braces himself and counters. Michael drives a knee into his side before they exchange a flurry of rapid strikes, but a spectator named Bernard denies it's an artifact, insisting it is pure strength. Our protagonist's movements are sharp and refined, with precise strikes that begin to overpower his opponent. Bernard explains that while an artifact might enhance one's potential techniques, this polished still have to be learned and mastered. A Mr. Ferret exclaims over his advanced combat skills, marveling that he has mastered them at such a young age. When Princess Alicia is asked if she likes him, she replies without a hint of hesitation. When the suggestion of an engagement is raised, she pauses for a moment before agreeing, but only if he also accepts. She says it would be interesting, and her father promises to pull some strings so her proposal won't be refused. Back in the fight, our boy shifts, leaving a momentary opening. Michael lunges into the opening, but in a swift counter, Evan slams him to the floor and locks him in a hold. After that, the referee calls the match and declares Michael D. Erlock the winner. Ryan kneels and asks if the protagonist disputes the outcome, but he calmly admits defeat. Michael praises him for the duel, remarking on his noticeable improvement. Evan advises his opponent to focus more on his physical development to improve faster. At last, they clasp hands, ending the bout on good terms. Watching from the crowd, Mr. Ferrati comments on how he envies the Marquis for having such skilled children. He remarks that even the eldest son, Eric, is impressive, but now another talented son is making a name for himself. Mr. Ferrati notes that the Shurin family's prospects are sure to rise thanks to Evan. He then asks Crow if he still considers himself Evan's rival. Crow stiffens and admits the boy has grown much stronger since their last meeting, even suspecting that he now lags behind. In the center of the ring, a man named Michael turns to the crowd and declares Evan's performance as proof of his skill. The king sighs, and the marquis adds that Evan doesn't need to choose such a difficult path. After a pause, the king concedes, but sets a limit. Evan may only challenge the dungeon up to the 5th floor. He also warns that the 6th floor is far too dangerous, but Evan promises to clear it and return safely. In his head, however, he thinks that this isn't his only chance. He's already planning to push for the 10th floor on his next birthday. Mr. Ferrati raises a glass, telling Evan to forget about complex matters and just enjoy his 12th birthday. Evan agrees, but Shine snatches the glass away, insisting he's not allowed any alcohol. Just then, a smiling Serena walks up to him, saying she came to keep her promise. Evan freezes on the spot as she appears before him, announcing that she's grown stronger thanks to his advice. Serena then declares her desire to join the Dungeon Knight Order. Alicia steps in and casually remarks what a coincidence it is, since she wants to join too. Evan yells in disbelief at her arrival. He realizes that 2 death flags he thought he'd avoided have just reappeared. Shine approaches and reports that the king, the Marquis Count Ferrati, and the other nobles have stepped aside for a private conversation. Evan tells the crowd they'll readjust the stage to liven things up. He calls for the cute girls to perform, and the group starts playing while Hannah asks Ryan for a dance, to which he agrees. Servina rushes in frustrated that she's late after getting changed. The protagonist tells her to just ask someone for the next dance. Serena suddenly cuts in, declaring she wants to dance with Evan. Wasting no time, she grabs his hand and pulls him onto the floor. Evan dances with Serena as she remarks on how popular he is. She mentions she didn't expect another noble would be interested in his Dungeon Knight Order. He explains that Alicia is the daughter of the Magic Kingdom's Dungeon City Fate. He confirms they've only met once before. Serena waves off the concern, praises his dancing, and excitedly asks for another round. Before he can refuse, the surrounding guests erupt in a loud cheer, drawing his attention. The butcher from the local shop comes out carrying fresh skewers. Some recognize them as brother skewers, while others wonder if the Sharon family hired them. Though there are concerns about the skewers being made from monster meat and potentially poisonous, Evan just smirks as Serena takes a bite and proclaims how delicious it is. The princess stares at the skewers before taking a bite herself. She shouts that it's delicious and insists to Evan that she wants it served in the castle too. Evan explains that it's monster meat, which makes her hesitate, wondering if it's truly okay to eat. However, he quickly reassures her it's safe since the Marquise's family guarantees it. The nobles nearby order several skewers, and the townspeople step forward to get some too. The cook signals to Evan that it's a huge success, just as the young master predicted. The protagonist smirks, noting that as long as it tastes good, anything goes. A voice calls out from behind him, and when he turns, he instantly recognizes Genian from the Thunderbird Guild. He remarks how rare it is for anyone besides dungeon explorers to appreciate monster meat. Calling him impressive, Evan recalls that he's the leader of that small but elite guild. Genian insists they're just short-staffed, which Evan dismisses with a wave. The man adds that their group is only known among insiders, so most people haven't heard of them. The protagonist cuts him off by ordering 2 more skewers, making it clear he isn't interested in being recruited. Genian presses on, vowing that he won't hand Ryan over. Evan, however, just takes a bite, unconcerned. Genian warns that he can't handle so many talented allies on his own before leaving abruptly mid-conversation. Ruby then steps up and quietly points out how rudely he just dismissed the guildmaster. Soon a red-haired girl approaches with a man who introduces himself as Alan, the guildmaster of Wandering Paradise. She says she would have greeted him sooner if she'd known he was in their territory. The protagonist recalls the guild's reputation for their fierce loyalty and for protecting the dungeon city from any foe. Aloha Vanserve of the Phoenix Guild appears with Mira, the vice captain of Heartshield. She explains that their master stayed behind because he was feeling unwell. He remembers Aloha as the Ice Witch, who once fought alongside Heartshield's tanks. Then Vlad Vanalta of Evergreen and Selene Annis of Megumina step forward one by one. Daisy tilts her head curiously and asks about his combat technique. Evan replies that the Knight Captain Michael once received a dungeon blessing, mastered it, and then passed it down to him. She presses him further, asking if he truly fights monsters using only techniques, and warning him that it's reckless. He admits that his combat skills aren't all that useful inside the dungeon. He explains they're just for self-defense, while he researches new ways to support the Knight Order, which he plans to test out in the field. Alan is impressed by how deeply he studied the matter. Aloha looks him in the eye and asks if his goal is to conquer the dungeon. He firmly replies that the Dungeon Knight Order was created to protect the city. He says its purpose is already crystal clear. It doesn't need another one. He adds that simply clearing floors to get stronger and protect the people is enough. Daisy blinks, surprised by his lack of ambition, as he completely dismisses the idea of reaching the dungeon's end. He argues there's no point if it gets you killed. A man nearby chuckles at that, remarking that at least our hero knows how to value his life. A cloaked figure suddenly emerges from the crowd. The hood falls back to reveal Prince Damien, and Evan gasps his name in shock. The prince notes that, at the very least, Evan knows how to value his own life. Onlookers begin to recognize him as Prince Damien L. Silkline. Evan greets him with a formal bow, calling it an honor. Damien remarks that he doesn't look very honored, then gets straight to the point. He's here to give an order. From this day forward, Evan is to protect the prince's younger sister as if she were his own life. Evan simply raises a hand and refuses. The prince, stunned, asks how he could reject the offer so easily and questions if he has a problem with Serena. Evan replies that this isn't the place to discuss personal feelings, adding that he is on the path to becoming captain of the Dungeon Knight Order. He explains that the captain's wife must remain within the dungeon city for life, and if she isn't prepared for that, she can't be his spouse. Because of this, he concludes taking the princess as his bride would be rather difficult. Without missing a beat, Serena declares that she'll simply join the Dungeon Knight Order with him. Damien immediately demands to know if Evan put her up to this, but he quickly denies it. The prince draws his sword and challenges him to a duel, declaring that if Evan loses, he must marry Serena. Evan protests, but Damien cuts him off, reminding him that he can't refuse a prince's command twice. The prince's blade gleams, but it's an incompatible weapon for him and actually hinders his power. Evan accepts the duel on one condition. If he wins, the prince must promise to never make such requests of him ever again. Damien agrees and orders a guard to lend Evan a weapon, but the offer is politely refused. Instead, Evan will rely on his martial art Heaven's Weight, a technique designed to defend against the claws and fangs of dungeon monsters. He prepares to fight unarmed, while the prince is determined to put him in his place. The duel begins, pitting a swordsman against a bare-handed fighter. Damien shouts his name and charges. Evan counters with a single punch, and the prince drops to the ground out cold. The match is over in an instant, leaving Evan wondering how on earth one hit was enough. Could having the wrong weapon really weaken him that much? Michael steps in, explaining that the heavy aura from Evan's punch is still lingering around the prince. He adds that taking a direct hit from Heaven's Weight likely causes internal injuries. Evan insists he barely even touched him. Michael replies that his skill is undeniably impressive, even if the first prince does seem to be a bit on the weaker side. The victor approaches the fallen prince and tells him a sword doesn't suit him. He suggests he try something he's better suited for, like a hammer. The prince, slowly coming to, questions the advice. A hammer, why not a spear? Evan urges him to pick a weapon that matches his build, warning that forcing the wrong one will only hurt him in the long run. Damien hesitates but listens as Evan explains that a sword's true worth depends entirely on its wielder. The prince silently considers this, agrees to keep it in mind, and then departs. Meanwhile, Serena insists on staying with Evan, who allows it just for the day. She asks for another dance, but he declines, telling her they've danced quite enough. Just then, Alicia steps forward and invites him instead. Serena waves, securing a promise for another dance later. Alicia notes his popularity, admitting it's unpleasant but no longer matters. She then reveals her intention: she's going to be engaged to him. As they dance, Alicia announces that she'll soon be his fiancée. Evan dismisses the idea, insisting his father would refuse, but she calmly counters. She explains that her own father will be the one pushing for it, which is why he was following them earlier. He suddenly recalls seeing their fathers speaking together and realizes with dawning horror that they must have been discussing his engagement. Evan protests that it's unheard of for someone like him to be chosen. She just replies that she has already agreed. He demands to know why, panic creeping into his voice. Alicia leans in close, whispering that for a man who acts like he knows everything, he seems incredibly afraid of her. Our boy reminds himself this is only their second meeting. He mentally curses Shine, wishing he had completed his poker face training. Alicia adds that she finds his reaction amusing and, wanting to see how long he'll stay afraid of her, has decided to stick by his side. He recognizes this as a code red situation and decides he needs to escape the party immediately. All he wants is to slip away unnoticed. Evan tries to leave, but another girl intercepts him and asks for a dance, and soon more begin to step forward. First Servina, then Hannah, and soon a small crowd has formed with everyone waiting for their turn. Nearby, Shine and Ryan watch the scene unfold. One comments on his popularity, while the other shrugs it off, saying it's to be expected for their young master. Shine suggests that Bellewa join in too, and offers to speak to him on her behalf. She sharply refuses, saying it would be too forward of her to approach him first, but Shine reminds her that today is a special occasion. Bellewa replies that just being near him is special enough for her, and from now on she'll cherish every single day. Suddenly, Shine calls out to the young master. He turns and hears that a certain lady would like an escort. Pointing toward Bella, Shine asks how long he intends to keep her waiting. Our boy apologizes, explaining he was distracted. As he looks at her, he wonders if she's upset with him. Kneeling before Bellewa, he addresses her as my lady and asks if she will grant him the honor of escorting her tonight. She begins to protest, saying she couldn't possibly impose. Evan tells her to put aside such formalities for tonight and repeats his request. Pointing at him, she declares she would be delighted. The crowd watches in awe. Crow mutters about wanting to become Evan and win Balawa's heart, but Alicia quickly tells him to stop dreaming. Bellewa turns to the boy, calling him a noble figure at the center of the world, though he insists he's just some aristocrat from the outskirts. Later, the Marquis meets with his son and informs him that all his engagements have been put on hold for now. The young master praises his father's decision. They both share a laugh until his father remarks that the king would never hand the princess over to a dungeon knight. His father clarifies that it's not just any knight, but a dungeon knight captain. He explains they were able to decline and hold their ground. Our boy concludes that the whole issue with Princess Serena is resolved. The Marquis adds that even if the king runs out of cards to play, he won't stop and warns him to be careful. Evan quietly hopes someone better comes along for the princess soon. His father then shifts the subject. He says that while things are looking up, Count Ferrat's daughter has made a decision. Evan listens as the Marquis explains that the Count wants her placed in the Dungeon Knight squad as a reserve member. Hearing this makes our boy scream in frustration. The Marquis continues, saying that if she toughs it out there for a while, she might eventually become an official member. He doesn't need to explain what that implies, and there's no escaping it now. He points out the growing military strength of the dungeon city, something that can't be ignored. The Marquis also mentions the fancy clothes given to children under the guise of reserve roles. He challenges his son after coming this far. Is he really going to abandon them? Then his tone changes and he says it's time he knew the real reason, asking why his son is so afraid of women. After a pause, our boy admits he's afraid of keeping someone close who he can't control. He claims that he's worried he'll get hurt by hidden intentions and asks if that makes him foolish. The Marquis denies it, saying he isn't stupid, just unusually mature for his age. He warns that avoiding people entirely isn't the solution, adding that even failed efforts will help him grow, though he understands and respects his son's intentions. The Marquis explains that true learning only comes from direct experience, and even failure is part of that process. He urges him to reflect on both himself and others, using each outcome to improve. Evan agrees, though, his real motive is to avoid girls to prevent the deadly scenarios he remembers. Finally, the Marquis congratulates him on turning 12. Evan surveys the supplies laid out before him. He inspects the boxes of blue-capped potions, concluding the amount is more than enough. As he finishes, Bernard approaches and asks why he hasn't rested yet. Evan explains that something came up the night before and that he plans to sleep now. Before he can move, a blue glow pulses from his chest. He pulls out Mirasol's necklace, which now shines brightly as it begins to change shape. At that moment, the door bursts open and Princess Serena rushes in. Though Evan recalls his father's warning from the previous day, she's already in his room announcing that a child is about to be born. She claims it for herself as she steps closer, insisting the child is ready to be summoned. Evan glances at the glowing necklace in his hand, starting to understand what it might mean. Serena, holding the red slime, Ruby explains it, overheard something about the new arrival. He warns her not to just barge in like that again, and she agrees, though. Her focus remains fixed on the summoning. Evan turns his attention to the necklace as light bursts from the pendant and the ritual begins. Energy spirals outward, forming a small blue shape that reveals itself as an ice slime. He notes that it has come willingly, as Serena extends her hands to receive it. The creature settles into her grasp, and she thanks it for being born, naming it Lucy, and placing it beside Ruby. The following morning, Evan meets with Bernard and presents a tray of bright red orbs, introducing them as battle beads. Bernard reacts with surprise. Evan explains that since his gloves nullify a weapon's abilities, crafting a standard weapon would be pointless. Instead, the orbs hit hard, enhanced by the gloves. Reinforcement effect. It provides both range and safety, while alchemical reinforcement will continue to strengthen them over time, making them ideal for his use. Bernard urges him to rely on them if things get dangerous. Outside, the others wait as the group gathers to depart. Evan spots his father among them and greets him. His father expresses surprise that Evan is heading into the dungeon so soon and asks if he's certain. Evan assures him he's prepared, though his father hesitates. His mother voices her support. After a pause, his father relents and tells Evan to be careful. He nods in agreement. Turning to face the others, Evan sees Ryan Balawa and Shine are already in position.